Hey guys, Kinggath here, and welcome to another episode of the Kinggath podcast. Today's guest is a freaking wizard at the creation kit. You've probably seen some of his mods, and not just for Fallout 4, but also Skyrim and Fallout 3 and New Vegas, and probably other stuff that I'm not even aware of. But welcome, Kris Takahashi. And did I say your last name right?
Takahashi.
Takahashi. Okay.
Is that what you said? Yeah.
I think that's what I said. Yeah.
Yeah. Close enough. It's just call me Kris Danger from
Kris
now on.
Danger. All right, we can do that. Kris
It's my
Danger.
new name.
Welcome, Danger. So, Kris, you, I think, are best known for interesting NPCs from Skyrim.
Yes, probably.
And that thing is just a monster. I think are you like over 250 NPCs in that? It's something ridiculous.
Yeah. That was my very first mod, so it's like not everybody is familiar with the development process on that. It started out as just some guy in an inn that I wanted to make talk and have a conversation. And then from then on, as I learned more about the creation kit, as I learned how to like fucking do quests and do other stuff. Can I swear on this podcast?
You can. We just might bleep you out.
Okay.
We're still trying to battle the algorithm and figure out what works and what doesn't.
Gotcha. Yeah, you could just bleep out that F-bomb. It's all right. But like I was saying,
we'll also probably bleep out the word danger, so it looks like you just called yourself the F-bomb.
Right. That works too. But yeah, that particular mod is like different than anything else I've ever done, just because you can follow like the progress of my learning the creation kit based on the updates in the mod. So when I learned how to do dialogue, when I learned how to do scenes, that eventually got in, and then after that it was like quests, and then deeper quests, and then just more content. So like one of the big complaints of the mod is just like the quests are so hard to find. You got to do A, B, and C, and D. Well, that's because the mod was originally those things. It was originally A, B, C, and D, and then the quest got added on later. And so it was just natural to make it an extension of the characters I already put in, rather than with Tales from the Commonwealth. It's just you start off right away. The quests and the characters are integrated together.
Right.
But interesting NPCs is just way different just because of that. And some people like that. Some people like talking to NPCs, learning their story first, and then doing a quest to resolve the loose end.
Yeah.
But that's definitely why there's a lot of like gates in that mod. It's just reflects the development cycle more or less.
Yeah, I bet people could probably trace even having not played, you could probably trace through like which ones were added when, just based on the depth of them.
Yeah.
I think we all tend to do that, and you seem to mod similar to the way I do, which is you like to just put all of your stuff in one big pile. And I don't know why. I don't know why. Sure. Why do you think we do that? I can't figure, because it makes way more sense to separate it out into smaller mods for the sake of like letting people mix and match. But there's something about making this like monolith that feels really good.
I think for me it's just laziness, because I just don't want to manage multiple pages.
Sure. Well, now you don't. I mean, you don't really manage them anymore, right? You've pretty much migrated everything to your own website.
And it is true that I've also, on the Nexus page, I've kept all the mods together. Like, I have Atomic Radio, I have Tales from the Commonwealth, and I have the Settlers from the Commonwealth mod, which is separate. But I just have them on one page because I just don't want to bother with multiple pages. Because the appeal of having, like, getting on the hot files or getting on X and X, like, the appeal of having, like, these separate fiefdoms, I don't know. It just seems like more work to me. So I don't.
I actually am. So we have a Twitter account where we'll post like mod recommendations every week, and I just added Settlers of the Commonwealth to the list, and I listed it as a secret mod because like I think a lot of people don't know about it because it doesn't have its own page. So like unless you're recommended it by somebody, you would never find it. Like most people don't go to the files page. So that would be my only argument for it, is you probably would have a lot more users for it, but you have so many damn users, I don't think you care.
Do you run into that problem, or is it the same thing with Sim Settlements, or is it just mostly because you have so many users, you're going to get that traffic anyway?
Yeah, I think at this point, like definitely when I first launched Sim Settlements, when all I had under my belt was salvage beacons, like then, it mattered. Like I needed to get the word out and have, like, it was awesome being featured by some people like Gopher and Oxhorn and stuff. But now it's kind of like, I think enough people watch my username for posts that the word gets out pretty quickly when I post a new mod. But I like to do what I've started doing is I just disable the bug report sections on the mods. and just like leave a comment section so people can talk about it amongst themselves. But for the most part, I try and do the same thing you do, which is steer all the traffic to my website, because trying to manage like forums or comment posts or bug reports on all those different mod pages is a nightmare. It's just a nightmare.
Exactly. And before, Nexus didn't even have a bug report section. Like when I started out the website and like added a Wikipedia and all that other shit, it was I fucking cursed again. All that other stuff, you can edit that out. When I added all that other stuff, the main goal was just to create a resource so I didn't have to answer the same question over and over again. Like I wanted a bug report section, I wanted a wiki section that people could look up. And part of the reason is because the development, like I mentioned earlier, it made the quest harder to find.
Yeah.
But having the wiki, having the bug reports section was huge, and Nexus didn't even have that at that point. And so I kind of got frustrated actually with the Nexus website, just because this basic feature that was necessary, like having a bug report section, wasn't there. And they still don't have a wiki section, right?
You can do like articles and stuff. Yeah, it's definitely not ideal. I also have a lot of problems with their bug report section. There are certain features it lacks that are pretty key to me, and it's kind of clunky to use. So I just don't. I shut it down. So I used to have it where it was like the main Sim Settlements mod page had bug reports, and then all of the other mods would just like had a link to post you to that one. But it's so clunky to use that I'm just like, this isn't worth it. It's causing me more headache than actually being helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I don't know what the best solution there is. I don't know if they should even bother to get in the business of bug reporting, because I think mods, like when they get to a certain scale, I think they need more professional bug tracking software anyway, because it's gonna take so long to track them down. Like I can't even imagine how long it takes you to track down a newly reported bug in something like interesting NPCs. Like, not that you're probably getting, like, that mod's been out long enough, you probably aren't getting a ton of bug reports there, but like to go back through and trace through all of those scenes and like, all the different interactions between those characters at this stage after you haven't developed it for so long would be pretty rough.
Yeah, especially when it's something that's likely hard to replicate, given like we don't know the load orders, we don't know what the exact action they took. I think at this point the mod's pretty solid. It's just been out for so long that anything that is like a normally replicable, that's hard to say, has been squashed. I'm sure it's Skyrim. You can always fuck something up if you just really do like this obscure set of actions all in a row. But I think for the most part, it should be solid at this point. Fingers crossed, but you never know. But at this point, it's.
I think to actually track them down, though, you would need a very rigorous bug testing software and like people who are willing to follow through and do very tight testing. Like it's really hard to track those down. So like trying to use a real generic bug reporter, which is basically like the bug reporter on Nexus is essentially like it's a comment thread that has a tag for the bug type. Like it's like, that's not really a bug report tool.
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I went away from that. And actually I remember I talked to you in an Octane on a podcast once, and you made a comment that stuck with me as like, once you make it to the top in the modding scene, you got a nice customer service job waiting for you. And I always remember
exactly.
that. It's like, wow, he's not wrong, because the right after Sim Settlements came out, I was spending like literal hours every day to try and keep up with all the comments. So it was.
That's your reward. It's a full-time job, just being a customer service agent for the rest of your life. It's just never gonna end. So,
I found ways to. I think the website helps mitigate it, because a lot of people aren't willing to go set up an account. Only your true fans will take the time to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think you had it right doing that, and it became a necessity for Sim Settlements, just with how big we decided to take this damn thing. But I think your mods are they've got to dwarf all of mine combined in scope and hours, just because I've just started learning recently how to do all the questing stuff and the dialogue. My God, it is complex. Like especially like the amount of ways the players can mess it up. All the different ways they can like screw up around, mess around with the things you thought, like, oh, I thought of everything they would do. No, you didn't.
Yeah, it's gotten a little bit more robust in like the recent iterations of the creation engine, but in like Fallout 3, like just to make a scene work, you had to like fire a script for every line So you had the fire script that says make person A say a line, then have person A fire a script that makes person B say a line, and just the amount of ways it could go wrong. It was bad. Yeah, I mean, I guess the game wasn't designed for scenes, but that's not gonna stop me anyway. I just decided to put them in. But yeah, it's Fallout 3 was tough, but yeah, Skyrim they have a few other extra little things that help you, and Fallout 4 even more so. But yeah, it's overall it's something that could definitely break, especially if you're not if you don't quarantine the area more or less, because there's all these random encounters and you're left with the plots of land oftentimes when you're building quests that aren't used by the main quest.
Right.
And those areas get random encounters, dragon attacks, vertebrate crashes or whatever. It's just it's a lot of stuff can happen. It's
a lot of stuff that can go wrong. And also, I find it's real easy to, like, if you try and interact at all with the vanilla factions, it can become a problem. Like that just the wrong, you have the wrong faction record or set the wrong person as an enemy. That things can go horribly awry very quickly.
Yeah, there's a lot of different tabs that you're gonna have to familiarize yourself with, because there's a faction tab, then there's aggression tab, and they're like different, but they're kind of linked together in the same way. It's just
aggression got me so many times, especially in doing the Conqueror stuff, trying to come up with the attack system, having all the aggression fields, not realizing exactly how they worked, and like thinking like, oh, I got the faction set, but then somebody who was frenzied would still just murder everyone. I was like, why are they doing this? They're on the same team. Like, frenzied, that's what that means. So one of the things that
friendly fire is just
the friendly fire is I've been just like starting a script with most of my characters now that says ignore friendly fire, like as the calling that on them, because it's too much of a problem, especially when the player's involved. Like they are inevitably going to shoot the crap out of every NPC around them, and it's hard not to, because the AI is so stupid. It just like constantly is running out in front of you and strafing around like an idiot. It actually
blame the AI.
The AI in Bethesda games reminds me of like MMO players. If they just had bunny hops, they would look exactly like them. Random movement, nonsensical.
Because that's the one thing about MMOs that bothers me, is just the running and jumping and breaking my immersion. Please walk.
Right, when Fallout 76 got announced, I'm like, immediately in my head, I just saw Vault boys bouncing around doing bunny hops.
Marsupial perk makes it even worse, because double the hops.
Encouraging the hopping too. That seems almost like a joke on that. Like they must have known. Like we're basically an MMO now. Let's give people super bunny hop.
When I first saw it, I thought it was a bug for sure, but then it turned out to be a mutation. It's like
it's a fun mutation though, which I think really. Fun. That game really isn't for me, but I see people who are using it. I think they're just in it for a playground. It's like it's just a big toy. So I think
if it was real life, that would be the mutation I would go for. I'd join a basketball team. I'd make $1 million.
Yeah,
dunking on LeBron James.
And it would be especially awesome if you were particularly short, where you're leaping over them, because it would just look awesome.
Yeah, I'm like 5'9", so I would look like or I shouldn't say. Can we cut that
out? It would look ridiculous. Are we not allowed to say that word anymore? Who the hell knows?
I don't
anymore?
think so. Well, if I was 5, let me redo that. If I was 5'9" and I was a little person, I'd look like a little person on the court anyway, right? Just because they're all like 6'8" already, right? So yeah, it would look pretty awesome.
5'9" would look pretty ridiculous out there, and especially if you're dunking it out there.
Yeah.
Okay, we would like marsupial mutation IRL, please. Can we make that happen?
Yes, please. I'm sure there's one that's better. I'm sure there's one that's more practical and more useful. There has to be, but that's the one that sticks out in my mind.
Yeah, I honestly don't know any of them. I never got any of them, and I haven't really watched any videos describing like all the different ones. But that one, as soon as I heard about it, I was like, oh my god, please tell me you get a kangaroo tail to go with it. And it turns out I don't think there's visual components to any of them, which is really disappointing.
No, it's understandable just because of how hard that would be. I mean, they have enough problems just keeping the person looking like a person. It's just keeping your clothes on. I've walked into cells and then come out, and then like other players be like, "Hey, why are you naked?" I'm like, "I'm naked? What?" And why are you a man? Because like the other guy's a player's a woman. And I'm like, why are you a dude? Why are you look like Nate?
I still think that would, if we ever get modding on there, that's like one of the first mods I'm gonna look for 76 is visual mutations. Like I want to see,
Yeah.
I want to see a marsupial with big kangaroo legs and a tail, or just give them like the Deathclaw body, like but humanoid, like a little miniature version of the Deathclaw body that has a big tail on it and like legs that look like they could jump. That'll be awesome.
And a mod that keeps your character looking like your character. I think it was Noctium actually I was playing with, that he would walk into a cell and then he'd walk out and then he'd look like the base game character from Fallout 4. He'd look like the protagonist. I'm like,
That's
and
so
his
weird.
character was a woman. It's just like, yeah, it was just weird. So.
That seems like it might be server side though. I don't know how many. That's going to be really interesting to see how mods work with that because of the server side thing of like how much of it are we actually going to be able to have control over? Because I haven't programmed for an online mod in many years, so I have an online game in many years, so I have no idea what it's going to be like for Fallout. Like the idea of Creation Engine being online just boggles my mind based on what I know about developing for it so far.
Yeah.
It does not make any sense. Like, what do you mean all the cells are loaded and available? Like that doesn't compute.
Yeah, I'll be curious too, just how much is local, how much is server side. It'll be interesting. I don't know. Maybe the mods will just be severely limited. I'm not sure, but I don't know.
Is that a game you're interested in modding for?
Depends, like you said, depends on the limitations. Depends on, can we add NPCs with voice acting? Because that's something that seems like an easy thing to mod in, like an easy thing to narratively fill, I guess, or gameplay wise fill, because that's the thing it's lacking, right? Usually when you look at a game and you want to mod it, you kind of look and see what it's lacking. If it already has it, there's like kind of no point, right?
Sure.
And NPCs that talk would be right up my alley, I guess. And
it would also, I think it would add a lot to that game, because like that to me, it was immediately that struck out when they said they weren't going to have them. I'm like, I don't think that's going to work, because I always find the fun in the Bethesda games is going back and forth between adventuring solo and like getting that peace and quiet, and then coming back to a city to talk about my accomplishments and get new missions, like having that back and forth. That's the fun. And like without the characters to like make it all real too, like without them, then it's like I'm just kind of I'm sandboxing essentially. But like once you introduce quests and NPCs, it makes it like there's a purpose, and there's someone to care about it, even if they're just a very poorly AI'd NPC. It like kind of makes it real, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it, but there's something important about those NPCs.
It's interesting that they went that way, because it wasn't a technical limitation, because there's been countless MMOs with NPCs, right? So
and they have the robots in there, so clearly they've got NPCs going on in there. Yeah.
I wonder if, like, when the Creation Kit comes out, that's the main thing I'm curious about. Is there going to be a dialogue system? Are scenes... Is it possible that like they stripped the scenes tab from the Creation Kit? Or
I would bet they didn't. They just, maybe you can't add the player to them, maybe is how it works.
Oh, that could be true. Yeah.
Where like the player just can't be a participant and like can't have dialogue options. Maybe they removed that. Now, since you've modded for Skyrim a lot and Fallout 4, so I have never modded for Fallout 3 or New Vegas. I've only done a little bit. I've opened up all of the GACs, and I've done a lot of modding of Skyrim for myself, not anything public. But I am not familiar enough with SSE stuff. How different is the Creation Kit between all these different games? Like as far as when they jump games, when they go to the next game, have you found stuff they removed from the previous one, from the previous editor?
Well, yeah, Skyrim and Fallout 4 are very, very similar. Fallout 4 has just a bunch of features that Skyrim doesn't have, that kind of streamlined stuff that makes things a little bit easier. The main difference from Fallout 3, and I didn't really use the Oblivion construction kit or the Morrowind one, but those were kind of similar to Fallout 3. I think the main difference is just how scenes are done in Skyrim. I think dialogue wise, at least the stuff which falls into my like purview is
Sure.
dialogue, and the scenes were a big step in Skyrim, and then like Fallout 4 basically doubled down on the scenes, because Skyrim still had the separation sort of where you had the player dialogue tab, you had the dialogue interface where you click on somebody and then like the interface comes up, and that was always separate from the scenes. There were two like separate systems at work.
Okay.
And Fallout 4, everything is scenes.
Yeah.
Like the player conversations, the NPC conversations, and you could see that basically in how you can click on an NPC and still walk away because it's still a scene.
Right.
You still have that freedom of movement. Whereas in Skyrim, if you click on somebody, you're locked in, and that's because it's a different interface. It's just like it's completely separate. So, the main thing about Fallout 4 is just it just added just more things that make it easier to mod, more or less. Like there's the layers bit where you're editing a cell. You can add certain objects to certain layers.
I just had that conversation with somebody the other day about when they were asking for how to fix a problem in the Skyrim CK, and I was like, oh, you probably just hide this layer, and they're like, there are no layers. I'm like, what? Really? I don't remember that. That's horrible. How do you not have layers? I have so many layers in my cells that I'm working on. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was based. I think it was with Virginia, right? Because I think she asked me the same thing. Yeah. But the thing about layers, it's so nice because you can add different parts of the cell to different layers, and if you want to get something out of the way and only work on a certain part of the cell, you can like disable the layer and like enable another one. Whereas in Skyrim, you're trying to click like an object and click it through like a bunch of other objects that are in the way, like a mist or a fog or something. And you always click the fucking fog.
Those mist. Oh, that's still a problem in Fallout, even with the layers. Especially if like if the Bethesda designers failed to put them on their own layer, it's just like mist.
You always click the mist. It's the worst. Like every single time. Yeah, Eleanor, I don't know if you had her on yet, or if you're gonna have her on, but yeah, that's one of her big complaints.
Like no, actually, I've actually asked her, but I haven't heard back from her about whether she wants to come on or not.
Yeah, she's probably busy playing Diablo or Undertale. She'll get back to you. She's good about that eventually.
Right on.
But the other thing about Fallout 4, I guess, is people have complained about is like the locked in for dialogue choice. That's one thing that Skyrim didn't have, is because it was done in a separate system. You could have as many dialogue choices as you want, but the Fallout 4 has the 4 kind of system, whatever you call it. Yeah, but like I've found that it's overstated because I feel like most modders don't even like use more than 4 dialogue options at a time. So I don't even Bethesda, I think. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the 4 was fine. I think if you give too many options to the players, most of them are just gonna get overwhelmed and back out and just be like, I don't care. I'll just hit the first one. Like there's a psychological thing where if you have too many choices available, people just abandon ship and just don't want to make a choice. So like and if you need more than 4,
diminishing
you
returns.
can always there's diminishing returns to it. But I think if you need more than 4, you probably need to tighten up your story more, or like it can come in response. Like you can, after they hit Y or go into the question thing, then you can expand on a new set of dialogue options. Like I think it hasn't been so far in the questing we've been designing. It has not been a limitation. And in fact, if anything, there's been several times where we're like, it's a shame we have to have 4 because there's really like we really just need a split. We just need 2. Like I liked the way Mass Effect did it, where it was variable, where it was like there were often 4 options, but sometimes it was literally you had 2 to choose from or just 3. Like that I preferred.
Exactly.
And it's a shame they didn't do that for this, because if you don't put the extra option in, it still shows in the interface and it just looks really wonky.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
like that is another thing. That's probably a common complaint. Is just sometimes you don't need 4, but I mean, people have gone over this, so we don't need to rehash.
Right. Yeah, so you don't need 4, and you end up just putting in yes and okay as 2 of the options or whatever.
Yeah,
right.
There's like 2 options that, exactly, basically mean the same thing. But if anyone has a right to complain about only being limited to 4, it's me, because in NPCs I'd regularly use like 5 or 6, and if I'm not complaining, then you shouldn't complain. But because I've seen people's mods, and most people's mods do not have more than 4 dialogue options.
No, like I said, I think most people's mods tend to be, I see more often than not, empty entries where it's like, they don't want 4 entries. They definitely don't want more entries.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was actually stunned. So like I have had your mods basically always installed. Like as soon as you release Tales, I grabbed it, and I never ever found. Well, here's the thing: I probably did find quests in it and never knew, because you have them so seamlessly integrated. It wasn't until I did one last night where it clicked for me. It was like, I've been over to this location a million times and I've never ever seen this, and that was the 3 Little Wastelanders.
Yeah.
And like your stuff is really, really well done, and you like integrate so perfectly with the player dialogue. It's just very, very seamless. So very, very impressive. And like I wouldn't have thought you needed more than 4 for any of those. I thought they all felt like they played along smoothly. Yeah, I can't imagine you wanting more than 4 for those.
Yeah. I think a lot of that is basically you're trying to, because like I can't make new cells. Like I mean, I probably could now. I just like I've been like practicing a little bit and doing other things besides just straight adding quests. But yeah, like just trying to integrate them into the world and just make it natural and seamless. But also because of the fact that it's not a separate world, that sometimes it makes it easier. Like if you had a quest line that took you to I don't know, some other place, right? And you had your own design to it, and you had your own art or whatnot. I guess it would probably feel a little less like part of the base game, but because like of a limitation of mine, it actually works out for the better sometimes, because you're trying your best to integrate it with the existing sort of architecture or whatnot.
I prefer it personally. I love mods that try and integrate in with the rest of the game to make it more fleshed out. Because the problem with I always find I have this problem with the DLC too, and like so World Space Mods DLC, it makes it feel like I'm playing a different game, but I want to play that game. Like I'm in that game for a reason. So then like it almost once you check out and you're in another world space, then it's like there's like this disconnect where I don't feel like I'm playing my actual character. I'm playing some new character is what it tends to feel like, because there's only so much they can reference back and forth between the two. So like without all of that, like the references of one of the things that was nice about like Far Harbor, for example, is if you brought Nick, there's a lot of, you have that character that's pretty tightly integrated that has a lot of references so that it feels combined. But for the most part, like everything in Far Harbor is all about Far Harbor. They don't mention stuff in the Commonwealth, and if you do things there, it doesn't affect the Commonwealth and vice versa. And like, so that happens a lot to me in those big overhaul mods where they send you to a new world space. Is like, it's like, oh, that's not even my character, because they have no idea what I did, what I just spent 200 hours doing, earlier in my playthrough, which is always kind of a bummer. And
even Nick, the voice acting on that, like his voice is slightly different. So
yeah, that's a little awkward. I think that was something that's like when we started doing voice characters for some of the Sim Settlement stuff, our sound guy Dell warned me. He's like, it's very difficult for voice actors like who are just doing it for mods, so people who are amateurs, to replicate their exact same sound setup. Most of them might have, maybe they shifted their room or got new equipment, or they just can't duplicate the exact circumstances on the day, or they can't do the same voice the same. And he's like, and he told me that he's like, just look at how Nick sounds different between Fallout 4 and Far Harbor, and that's a professional voice actor with a professional studio. It's like, so if they can't do it, how do you think we're going to do it at the amateur level? I think that's a good point.
Yeah, it's usually a good idea to kind of get it all done at once, more or less.
Yeah,
because then the sound setup is usually the same because they haven't moved, hopefully, and then they usually have the voice like in their head, or they have the accent that they want to use, especially if they're using a voice. Like with Nick, I guess the actor is like using a specific kind of like a noir, I guess is the word, esque voice, and he kind of lost it in Far Harbor. So when the dialogue is there together, because you can ask him like vanilla stuff, and then you could ask him Far Harbor stuff, and then like the change in voice is so fucking shocking.
Right, when it happens right in there. Yeah, we decided to deal with this for our latest character stuff, where we're just keep adding more to the same characters, and like I'm sure there's tons of spots already where you can hear the difference, but we're just like, you know what, this is a fun experiment to try and do it, because it makes it a lot easier to do things in chunks. I find, like, I think you kind of do that with your releases, where you release a handful of quests at a time, or maybe like a patch with just one new quest. It's a more fun workflow to like get some feedback from the community and like not feel like you're just bulking up this monster update. Like I don't know, there's something about getting releases regularly that feels good.
For sure. There's a good like a dopamine feedback.
Yeah, you feel like you're getting a little bits of accomplishment. Whereas if you just planned your 250 NPCs from the beginning, you may have never finished because it would have felt insurmountable.
No way.
So how many NPCs would you say you have in Tales? Because it's a little bit different. It's measured more on number of quests versus actual. Because a lot of them involve a bunch of NPCs. Like, for example, the Three Little Wastelanders had at least 6 NPCs involved with it.
Yeah, like with Tales from the Commonwealth, it became less of a thing. Like with interesting NPCs, this is pre-quest, right? Pre anything but NPCs. Then at that point, the number of NPCs mattered. Like it's kind of like Settlers of the Commonwealth is the same way. With Settlers, it's the number of NPCs matter. Like, okay, so you got 10, then we have 20, then so on. So the releases kind of were tied to the number.
Sure.
Because that was the content. The
Right.
NPCs were the content, and so it matters how many were being included in each upgrade. With Tales, I never had a count because it was never the number didn't matter. The number of quests mattered. So it was
Right.
more of like a quest count thing. But even with that, I designed most of them, like not in the creation kit, but I sort of like mapped out the stories or whatever and the locations for most of them.
Mm-hmm.
I did that before the creation kit was released, because when did Fallout 4 come out? It came out like November or something.
Yeah,
like
and
that.
then we didn't get the CK for like 6 months, maybe longer.
Yeah. So I stopped playing like for fun after about, I don't know, 3 months, I'd say. So it was around February or so, or January or February, where I just started like, instead of playing the game, just started writing for the game. And so at that point, it was just, once the CK came out, there was about like 20 quests or so that I had already planned out. It was just a matter of getting it voiced and getting it, well, even the voicing, I think I might have done in advance, but it was just a matter of just getting it in the game. So that first release had a bunch of stuff. And then after that, it was mostly about fleshing out the followers, because the followers, that took a long time just to get it all voiced. And
I can't imagine.
Like, all the locations, yeah. And then just getting the quest for that, and the quest for the followers and all that. And yeah, so it was a lot more of an upfront release with Tales from the Commonwealth than it was, just because of the way, just because of the time frame, I guess, the CK. It didn't come out until late, so we had those extra months to plan.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just different because I also wasn't learning on the fly like I was with Skyrim.
Sure. Although you had to learn the new improvements, which is all probably just made things go faster and faster for you.
Yeah. There's like a lot of things that just in terms of just setting stages and stuff, like just technical stuff like that, where it's easier because with Fallout you just hit a radio button. With
Right.
Skyrim you kind of have to like type the script out. But yeah, it's just little stuff like that just makes it easier with the new CK. But
It also makes it so much cleaner. Like I hate having all those little script fragments to manage.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so it's nice being able to like we've started a new technique where every quest gets one master script and everything is triggered inside of it off of on-stage set events instead of in fragments. So it's just like nice and clean, one file for the whole quest, and then everything else is through radio buttons. It's like, this feels better. This feels right.
Yeah. Fragments in Skyrim, especially because you don't have the namespaces, you don't have the like folder organization
Right.
that you have in Fallout 4. Skyrim is just one massive folder full of scripts, and it's just all your fragments, everything. And eventually it just gets to the point where you're just like, F it. Just make it as messy as possible. Who cares? It's already a mess. So it's just
Yeah, I can't. Oh, that would have driven me nuts. I think the scripting is probably the biggest improvements they made between Skyrim and Fallout. Like the trying to go back and help people. So I often tell people like any tutorials you find for Skyrim are pretty much relevant for Fallout 4. Like there isn't really. There's very few things that got removed between the two, but the other way around is not the case. So when people ask me to help them script for Skyrim, I'm like, nope. Like I'm so like I got so hooked on all the new new toys that I just can't. Like I won't even like let my head go back to where it was before, where it's like, where you didn't have like basic things like proper timers and stuff. It's like that. Oh, I can't. Deal with it.
Once you step forward, it's like that for anything. Like once you've seen, like an HD TV for the first time, going from what it was in like the early 2000s, where it's just like standard definition. Like once you make that leap, you can't go back. It's just
right. Yeah, it's pretty difficult, but it's especially difficult for me using tools. Like I don't know about because then we're still doing work. Like modding is work, especially like you talk about you did all the planning. That was the fun part, I'd imagine. The fun part is like thinking about all these new ideas, and you're doing location scouting. Actually going in and punching in the copy pasting the scripts and making sure you've got the correct facial animation selected. That's the work part. It's pretty tedious. It takes a lot of hours. So like having that get harder is not good.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to do more work. You want to have fun.
Right. So do
Especially
you
when you're not being paid for it.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like that's one of the things. Like whenever I start falling behind on bug reports, or people are like, "Hey, how come you're releasing new mods without finishing all these features you promised?" It's like I got to keep myself interested too. Like I can't just do all the work part. It's got to be some of the fun stuff too. So like that's kind of how I balance my dev schedule and make sure I don't burn out. Is experiment with new things periodically and like try and do some of the fun stuff as well as the work. Otherwise it's just that customer service job you were talking about.
Yeah.
So now you plan, so you had most of the Fallout 4 stuff planned. It sounds like you haven't done the same with 76. Do you think the next single player game will have that same effect on you? Like, for example, if Tez 6 comes out, do you, in your head, are you immediately going to go plan out your next incarnation, or is it all going to depend on how the game plays for you and if it captured you or not?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm assuming it will, because it's going to be a single player experience. Like Fallout 76 is different just because, one, we don't know what we're going to be able to do, and two, it came right after Fallout 4, which, I mean, in terms of just like creative juices, or just like you're passionate about something, it's easier if it's something different. Like it was easy to mod for Fallout 4 after Skyrim just because it was something completely different. And I think that's kind of the same way Bethesda feels in terms of going to Starfield, just because it's such a departure from what they've done previously. I'm sure it's like much better for them creatively. It's much more healthy to do something different. So like Fallout 76 has a bunch of strikes against it, just in terms of it was right after Fallout 4. It's a MMO. We don't know, not an MMO, but it's a multiplayer game.
Basically
we don't know.
It's basically an MMO.
Yeah,
it's a tiny MMO.
Yeah, so we don't know what the parameters are. So I don't know if I should make a quest that has NPCs, that has dialogue, because I don't know if that's even possible. So right there, you're handicapped, right? You can't plan for it. So it has all these strikes against it, whereas I don't see the same for Starfield or TS6. I just don't think they're going to be handicapped in that way. So I could totally see myself making plans for it, because I know right off the bat there's going to be a creation kit, that there's going to be modding, because we don't even know for sure if there's going to even be modding for like Fallout 76. So it just, like, the one thing you don't want to do is just waste your time, because you're doing it for free. You don't want to waste your time on something that you're going to end up not even being able to do.
Sure.
That was actually a big concern of mine for Fallout 4, because once we learned that the player was voiced, there was just no guarantee that we would be able to make dialogue for it. A lot of those concerns were alleviated just by how just how many lines there were for the player. There's just so much to use that, and when playing around with it, when testing out certain dialogues or conversations, I found I was able to build it, and I was able to make the quest that I wanted, and because I essentially wrote a quest with no player voice first, and then once I learned that there was a player voice, I actually was like, I transferred it over and changed some of the questions, obviously, but I was still able to make the quest work. So like, okay, this can work, we can do this. I don't know if that's possible for Fallout 76, just because we don't know what's server side, what's client side.
Right. Well, I mean, so far what's been in there is that I from what I recall, I don't think I've ever had a dialogue prompt. I think it's always just like, you're just told, like, they just talk at you. So like a robot will come up and just like do its recording, and you get quest objectives, and like that's it. So I think that'll be probably how you have to do it for this too, which that definitely changes things, because then it's less interactivity. You're not going to have any branching story. Essentially, it eliminates the RPG from it. It turns it into like everything is a fetch quest essentially, which is kind of jarring, and like that feels bad, I think, as a like one of the things that I really, really loved about your quests is the fact that they have multiple completion options. So they reminded me of like old school RPGs. Like your stuff feels like more at home in New Vegas than it does in Fallout 4, because you actually care about, give the player options, and you like acknowledge like their stats, and like it feels more old school RPG. And 76 takes it in the other direction and is like, screw all of that. You have no choice. Like, your only choice is, do you complete this objective or don't, or you just let it rot in your list.
Streamline it.
Streamline it, right? That's what it's all about.
I think you would have to take the approach of, like, you couldn't have dialogue with the player, but you could have NPCs talk to each other. So you would basically make the player like a passive participant in every conversation, and then the only way that they would have choice is basically through action. So everything would have to be like an action. They'd have to flip a certain lever, just pick a certain entry on a terminal. Their choice would be there more or less.
Yeah.
It's possible, but it's just the thing I hate about it. Well, I shouldn't say hate. That's too strong a word. The thing I don't like about it is that it limits the options. Like, there's nothing wrong with a quest that's only terminal based, that's only note based. It's just when there's 100 of them that it gets redundant and it gets tired. It's just like having like if you had like even 30 of them be like an NPC who talks to you or whatever, just changes it up, just makes it, variety, spice of life. It just makes things a little bit different to where the note quests seem less redundant. But when it's all note quests, all terminal quests, that's when it gets weary on you. So
I agree. Just, like, I remember the first time I listened to when I started playing the game for the first time and I listened to holotape, I'm like, oh, I love these, because in Fallout 4, I did love them. I loved getting the holotapes because they were so rare. It was like, there's probably like maybe 30 or 40 total in the whole game world that are, like recordings. And like, so then they're special and they're fun to listen to. And then in 76, you get spammed with like 30 of them within the first 5 minutes. Like, you're just like nonstop. Yeah. Here's a tape. Here's a tape. Here's a tape. And they autoplay over each other. It's like, it's a nightmare. But the thing you said about passive observing, I felt like Fallout 4 kind of had that going on. And this is kind of the revelation we've had recently in our writing, is that you almost approach, because especially, I mean, it's probably not like that for Fallout 4 base because they got to choose the lines, but because we're working within the confines of pre-written lines, we can't have the player reveal or respond to much exposition. So it all has to be kind of told, like they're just an observer, and they get to, they get some choices at some point to like steer the conversation, or, to hit, like if the story hits a certain beat, they can make a decision which direction it goes, but they're not adding in, the player doesn't get to add, again, exposition is the best thing I can use to describe it. They don't get to add any in that. So it all has to be told to them from the other characters. And that's, it's not a terrible way to go about things, because I think a lot of single player narrative games do that too, where the player is mostly just observing a story in front of them, and they make, like, all the Far Cry games are kind of like that. And I find those fun. Even though I wouldn't call them, they're definitely not RPGs, even if they have like RPG mechanics in them. For the most part, you just you make some major decisions at points in the story, but otherwise you're just watching other characters that had relationships interact with each other.
Exactly.
And I think your stuff probably does that a lot too. Like, it's hard to have, it's kind of hard, I think, in modern games to really have the player tell their own story, in a sense, because you either you're force feeding them dialogue options that could let them lay out an interesting story, or it all has to just be in their head and they're responding with variations of yes and no to point it down. Like, it's almost like a choose your, like, we just can present them with choose your own adventures, basically.
I mean, the base game just has the advantages. They can create characters that hypothetically matter to you, I guess. It's like Sean or what. Sean.
That's a terrible example. Sean.
But in terms of just modding, because of the lack of specificity that we have in terms of just being limited in terms of what the player can say. So even like the companions, that was probably the most difficult part of Tales. Like, just like, because you have to have these like deep, like meaningful dialogue and conversations with these followers of yours, but how to prompt those questions, how to prompt the replies. I mean, fortunately, you're able to use some of the other player responses in terms of what they say to the other companions, but that is probably what was the hardest part about Tales. It's just because that requires a bit, like, you're having a meaningful conversation with somebody. You don't want to just be saying yes and no, right?
Right.
You want to be able to like prod on and just like ask and respond in ways that are empathetic, that a real person would do. Like if they share a sad story, you want to be empathetic to that sad story. You want to be able to respond in a way that's meaningful. And so that was probably the most difficult part. So in the end, you do kind of have to steer the dialogue to certain beats or certain points where the player can respond, where you have the right line, you have the right response. But yeah, it's definitely difficult. There are definitely like choices that you have to make that are affected by just not having the player be able to be their own person or be able to say what you want. So
Right.
I definitely found that easier in Skyrim.
So yeah, where you can just write whatever you want and they don't have to actually say it.
Like I think a lot of the quests in Skyrim, there are definitely more of the emotional quests. I did try to sprinkle in a few in Tales, but you can definitely tell that there's just way more in terms of the quests in Skyrim that I made. There's just a lot more of the emotional kind. Whereas in Fallout, it's more just you're limited to what you have. So
Yeah.
I mean, I still think it works. I still think it's a good mod, and the quests are really good. It's just
It's a very good mod. There is no question about that. Did you find, and so you didn't, so I mean, I guess you've already answered this, is like, did you find it too limiting with the player dialogue? Because it was definitely, for all the writers we've had on some settlements, it's always been the biggest adjustment period. Is like, oh, I have to like reframe, I got to make sure that everything is framed in such a way that any storytelling is happening from the NPCs and the player just responds to it, as opposed to like sometimes the player could be driving the conversation, with Sean would be a way to drive the story from the player side, where you just can't do that at all. But I think most people who have stuck around and kept writing, they've stopped complaining about that. They're like, occasionally, you get to a point where it's like, how am I going to make this work? But there's always something you can do.
Yeah, I think once I understood the rules of engagement more or less, and just what I was gonna have to work with, and like once you have the list of the player lines, you kind of can steer it the way you want it to. I mean, there's always gonna be like human language, I guess, is sort of malleable enough to where you can find things that work. The same response works for different situations, I guess, more or less, as long as the tone is what matters more than anything, than even the words at times. So I think there's just a lot of like just vague enough questions that would work for any situation. Like, what do you mean by that? Something like that.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit more, or just something like that's vague like that can sort of prompt the NPC to respond in a way that like helps with the exposition and just feels a little bit more natural. Or obviously something like Sean is just so unique and specific that it's not going to apply to any situation. So unless you want to name your NPC Sean.
We made a great joke about that in one of our quests, where like at one point, if you have like 5 different options to say Sean, and the player and the NPC says it back to you every time, like there's just the exaggerated Sean's. But yeah, the Sean.
There is a quest. Go ahead.
I was gonna say the Sean thing really falls flat, but whatever.
No, there is a quest where I named an NPC. I think it was like Darcy or something.
Okay.
Where the player says the name Darcy. So there are times also that where the line is really where it really works, and you just have to name the NPC the same thing.
Right.
Change the spelling, right?
Yeah.
So I think, there was an instance where I did that, where it really worked for the quest. I really wanted to use the line, but the only way I could use it if I changed the name of my NPC, and so I did that.
Yeah, why not?
But yeah, you gotta find ways to work through it.
See, I find that part of the fun of designing anything, of like having some sort of limitations. Like if you put down a blank sheet of paper, or you open up a 3D program and you just have a blank slate there, it's really intimidating to even start. But like once you have some parameters and okay, well I can't do that, well then you want to butt up against that wall and you want to like, all right, well I'll push that as far as I can, and it kind of like slowly forces you down a path. So like a lot of times like game design decisions are almost made for you in that regard, because it's like, well I can't do that because that's just not available as an option. So working within those confines kind of helps steer, at least it works for me. It helps steer the direction of certain things, like where there are certain limitations within the workshop stuff. Like I know I can't run power chords with a script, so it's like, okay, well then I'll try and use more radial power or whatever. Like there's certain things where it just kind of steers the direction of my of design work, and then that in itself, just that limitation, tends to spawn like some new creative ideas. And so I think those boundaries are a good thing in a sense.
Yeah, I would totally agree, because that's actually how I got into modding. I think most people get into modding that way, is they have these big plans to make these giant worlds or DLC type worlds, and then they open the kit and they realize, okay, I can't do this. I need to work with what I know. It works small, start small.
Right.
And I think that's like my first mod for Skyrim was that. I wanted to make a giant DLC type story quest, but then I realized, okay, I can't do that, so let me work with what I can do, which is make this NPC stand in the corner and say a few lines. And from there, eventually I learned how to make him sandbox. I learned how to make him interact with another NPC, and then you just keep building on it, and then you build on that skill set. So,
well, geez, now I would say interesting NPCs is bigger than some of the DLC if you look at total content.
Yeah,
so you got there eventually. It's just not maybe on its own world space like you wanted.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, you start small, you just keep building, you get obsessed, and then you get some positive feedback, and you just keep going and going and going until it's its own thing.
I have been hammering on people about the positive feedback of like, you have no idea how much impact like putting a nice comment on somebody's mod will have. Like it could change, it could determine whether or not a mod author continues or not. If they get the right number of like thumbs up and hit hot files and get enough comments that tell them they're doing good work, like getting enough of that is like often all it takes to like push somebody in that direction. Because without the right amount, people are gonna be like, nobody cares. It's a waste of my time. Even if they enjoyed it, they can also go enjoy doing something else. Like I'm sure you have other hobbies you also enjoy, but you put your time into this one because you're getting that positive feedback loop, not only from yourself in completing those tasks, but also from the community.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, obviously, we do it because it's fun, but we also like to get that positive feedback. We also like people to tell us that we're doing a good job, because otherwise the possibility exists that what we're making is completely horrible.
right.
Continue.
Like how many of those unreleased mods that I have from Skyrim for myself are any good, or are they all just crap? But they were fine for me. So, but I think anybody who has the personality type to encourage them to release something to the public are the type of person who also responds well to positive feedback loops.
Yeah, exactly.
So like I think that's why. So I've been like in my Let's Play, I always end with an endorsement portion where I'm like, go endorse the mods you're liking, because I think anybody who's got the personality type to release something publicly cares a little at least about what other people think, and they want to get that encouragement. But so you've mentioned,
although eventually you get to endorsement mountain,
you get that customer service job.
Yeah, it's all work from there. It's just nothing but customer service. The endorsement don't matter at that point.
I think that it's less about the endorsements. It's just the complexity of the mods. Like inevitably, you build a mod as big as interesting NPCs, and there's so many like things that somebody could throw a wrench into that like you're just like you get to a point where there's going to be infinite bug reports, especially when you figure that there are so many people who are like, no matter what, I'm using this mod. Like I'm always going to keep that mod installed. So like then when they start adding all their other mods and it starts breaking things, they're like, all right, well, I don't want to get rid of this mod. It's awesome. So I'll just go tell that mod author because I know they're active. So like I think it's almost, you become a magnet for bug reports, even though a lot of them aren't necessarily you. Like I know I will be the first to admit that my mods have plenty of bugs in them. I take care of the disaster ones immediately, and then the others I will take care of as I solve them or as I have time. But I think that a lot of the reports that go to the bigger mods aren't necessarily from those bigger mods. They're often just because it's a disaster to troubleshoot load orders. Like you get up to 150, 200 mods, it's hard to tell what's breaking what.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's the endorsements necessarily that are triggering that so much as like, people like you and I like to build these monster mods where it's just like every idea we have into the same mod.
It basically touches the whole world. But
right.
Yeah, I think I think for the most part, like that whole like avalanche of customer service, avalanche of just reports has mostly passed, I think, at this point.
Oh yeah, but I think your stuff looks pretty stable here. I don't see a ton of complaints on your forums or anything. So
yeah, it's like not overly complex. I think that was my saving grace as well. Is just that because my scripting and programming knowledge is so limited that it's hard to break stuff when you're just setting stages and doing this and doing that. It's just. So I mean that worked in my benefit for something like as complex as Sim Settlements. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and I keep making it worse on myself because I just keep releasing more stuff, and that's all right. I enjoy to me it's like a fun challenge to like keep seeing how far I can push the envelope. I actually ran into a bug in doing the Three of the Wastelanders, but it wasn't. I'm sure it would have been one of those ones resolved itself, but Franz came out of the bunker and he wouldn't move, and I was like, oh, just crappy nav mesh. Like this is just part of the engine. So I just like did a move to command on him.
Feature.
Right. So I'm like that, but that type of stuff, and this is one of the things I keep running into now that I'm doing quest modding, is there are so many things at engine level that you just have no power over that it's really tough to prepare for those. to like, you know, like
Yeah.
the AI just failing to trigger a package. Like, well, what am I supposed to do about that? Like, I can't help you. What is your approach to that? So the biggest thing I've had trouble with, and maybe you have a suggestion for me, how do you deal with when somebody has been? It's especially a problem for me because I'm making sure my stuff goes on console as well. But how do you help players who run into a bug during your quest and then you fix it, but like how do you get them to then implement it on their save? Do you tend to tell them to roll back? Do you give them a console command to run? Like what is your approach to that?
It really depends on what the bug is. Some bugs, they can be fixed without like a console code. Like let's say you mark something a quest item and they can't drop it or something like that. You can just uncheck the flag that makes it a quest item and
Sure.
they can drop it. But if you have to stop the quest, which is how you normally fix it, it's too late for them to stop the quest if the quest completion, because the quest is already done. Like presumably they've already finished it, right?
Right.
So you would actually have to make a different quest, run it, and check and see if they finished the stage, and then stop the old quest.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah,
So
I see Bethesda has done that in some of their patches. There's a couple of quests in the game that are just like patch 112 fix, and it's like all it does is runs a stupid script to check some other thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that basically you can do that. You can sort of have your cake and eat it too, but it depends on the bug. But there are ways to account for players who finished the quest, who haven't, like who are in the middle of the quest. You kind of have to account for all areas. Whenever you do a patch like that, you have to account for all scenarios. That's what makes it harder to do it when it's post-release. Pre-release, it's easy because you just fix the quest the first time.
You tell your testers, suck it up and do it over again.
yeah, exactly. Post-release, you have to account for the three stages, the three phases prior to the quest, if the player is in the middle of the quest, and if the player has already finished the quest, and how to fix all of them without fucking up overall the experience for any of the three. There's like different things you could do. You could, like, if the alias is wrong, you could force the alias via script. Basically, the answer is script. You just gotta use your script powers.
Okay, so you have the same solution I do, which is brute force, like just force fix it with scripts. I just didn't know if there were any secret tricks you'd come up with, because you've been doing this for a long, long time.
Yeah, it would really depend on what the bug is. Like it's usually pretty specific, right? Like,
yeah. For me, the most common one I'm running into now. So we're doing something really stupid, and I'm sure you would wonder why I would try and do this, is make our quests work in settlements, where it's totally dynamic and we have no idea what the player's built. So then often a problem becomes the characters can't get line of sight with each other to have the conversation, or they can't path to one another. Like that's a common issue we're running into, and so far, it's easy to solve for PC players. I'm like, all right, we'll just go stand here, grab that NPC, and hit move to yourself, and they'll complete the scene. Xbox players, that's pretty hard. Like, one of the things I've been considering is like creating a holotape that's just like a series. It's like quests and then a list of all the stages, and they can basically force stages. But man, that sounds like a nightmare to make. Like, especially after a few months of adding quests.
Shouldn't they recognize the nav cuts though? That when you place.
They do, but for example, like if I spawn a new NPC at the workbench, if the player has that area like blocked off for some reason, it can be impossible for them to make a path, because there's nothing in Fallout 4 that prevents the player from making an unpathable settlement.
Yeah. You might have to like have all the scenes happen outside the settlement. I don't know how that would work.
Right. That's I thought you might say that, of like, why would you put that in a dynamic area? That's stupid. And it's I have considered that some of the important ones to make them happen outside, but the what we're trying to do is have like the player gets to choose a settlement to be kind of their hub, and like most of the entertainment happens there. But it's like it's for some players, it gets, just because of the design of their settlement, it becomes impossible. And I've just been trying to dream up ways to help Xbox players resolve that when they don't have the console to fix it. Because like I can come up with solutions. So like, for example, I might change the scene so where one of the phases like has a failsafe in it, like I've started to do, where I'll add an extra phase, with a timer that is ignore for completion, and if it gets to that timer, then it'll teleport an NPC. But it's for that phase is already passed, it doesn't it doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's the thing about scenes. If you have packages and things like that depend on players moving to the spot, if they don't get to the spot, the scene is stuck. It's
Right.
It's just, and nothing progresses. Whereas if I mean, you could have things that aren't dependent on them reaching a spot at a certain time, but then they'll be yelling at each other from like across the room, across the settlement, just screaming their lines at each other. So it's just, yeah. I mean, that's the issue with trying to make something both dynamic and scripted, more or less. It's just the two usually aren't compatible.
Right. Well, I think that's why most games do it differently. Like, I think most games end up going with cutscenes and stuff because it's something they have control over. But I like the challenge. I think having it all dynamic is just more fun, and it makes the world feel more real and reactive. Like, it feels like you're inhabiting and watching a real thing play out. And I think that's why a lot of us like the Bethesda games is, they're a little wonky and buggy and the graphics are dated, but they're one of the only games that really try to make it feel like you're just like inhabiting a world as opposed to watching a movie.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I feel like even
how many games?
I would say most of the games that have even some semblance of, like there's they might have RPG elements, but they tend to all feel like games with movies in the middle of them. Like, you're just watching. Yeah. Like the interactivity and like the amount of stuff you can do in like the Assassin's Creed games is amazing, but there's still like anytime there's major story events, they tend to occur in the equivalent of a cutscene, and it's like, all right, well that just pulled me out of the whole thing. Whereas in a Bethesda game, those would have been like scripted sequences right in front of you on the ground.
Yeah. Like, in how many games can you just even pick up a tin can and just put it in a bucket or something? Or put a bucket on somebody's head. There's just not many that even allow that level of freedom, that basic level of pick something up and put it somewhere else. That basic thing is just something that Bethesda does, and it's just expands upon that. It's just, there's like so much that you can do in a Bethesda game, and that's why it's so hard to squash all the bugs. It's just because it's limitless. So,
right. When it's all system based, like the fact that the blocking, like putting a bucket on their head happens to block their line of sight because the cone is actually based on their head position. It's like,
exactly.
Yeah, that wouldn't have, like, otherwise you'd have to script all those funny sequences. Like, but instead, being all system driven, like that stuff kind of emerges dynamically. And I think that's what they were trying to do and what they were hoping with 76. They're like, you know what, people like our systems. That's the fun. So if we just throw all these systems into a multiplayer game, it will work great. And it just didn't quite work as well as the single player versions. But yeah, I think the systems driven, it leads to wonkiness, but it also leads to like really cool stuff. And it's a really unique feel. Like, I can't think of another game I've played that made me feel quite the way a game like Skyrim does.
Yeah. And I think it's going to influence, or it already has influenced, a lot of other video games in terms of just like, I think Dragon Age was trying to expand more and have like more of an open world just because Skyrim was so successful. So
sure.
Hopefully, I mean, because they don't have the engine for picking up the tin can and picking up the bucket and stuff like that. But hopefully, I mean, that kind of stuff is more common.
I think it's getting there, because I think it's a lot easier to take a good looking game and add systems onto it than it is to take an old engine with how those systems and tack on. Adding in the ability to like pick up things with physics. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I got that totally backwards, because I guess if Bethesda has got all these systems in place, then adding in new graphics is not a big deal. But it also seems to me that like most games now are built on a handful of engines, and that inevitably those game engines will have those systems or methods to add those systems to games be built in, like a plugin. Like, it'll just be like you download the tin can throwing plugin for Unreal, and now your game has that. Like, it seems to me like that, like when you have that giant open community designing the engine together and designing plugins for it, like that's going to be way more powerful than the game engine that's way dated on a lot of things running with systems. Seems like all those other engines are going to catch up in those fun aspects, but then they're also like way ahead graphically, so where it's going to be a problem for Bethesda at some point, and maybe we're already getting to that point, and that's why they're getting so much grief. Because there's definitely been, like, Fallout 4 was hit with, I think critically it got good reception. I think there's a lot of players who were not satisfied with it, like they didn't like the player dialogue and the linear quests and things like that. I think sales wise though, Fallout 4 was like their best selling game ever, even more than Skyrim at the time. So like to them it was a success, and I love it. I think Fallout 4 is a huge improvement over Fallout 3 and New Vegas's gunplay. Obviously I love it, or I wouldn't freaking release nonstop mods for it. But I think that after that lukewarm reception to Fallout 4, then having Fallout 76 kind of, stumble out of the gate as hard as it did. I think there's been a lot more people willing to like scrutinize than they were before on Bethesda stuff.
For sure.
So I don't know what's gonna. I don't know if other game companies are gonna catch up to them or not, as far as like that interactivity level. If we'll start seeing.
Yeah, it's like, do we want to emulate the amount
of sure, or if they, or they can like emulate Skyrim, but do it on a game that looks 10 times better. Like you do that, like like build the equivalent of Skyrim in features in like the Unreal Engine and that standard look of like where like everything is like hyper real.
Yeah.
And,
I'm ready. I'm ready to dump 100 cheese wheels on
see how their game engine can hang.
I'm all for that.
Yeah. Well, because it seems to me like, and this is not the great example because their game engine doesn't look great either, but like PUBG seems to have a pretty substantial amount of interactivity going on in it.
Oh, do they?
And like the Arma game was very interactive, and you could do like that's what that's based on. You could do tons of different stuff. Like you could go down into a prone and crouch and like pick up things, peek around corners, and there's just like tons of object references loose everywhere. And like so to me that seems like they're kind of in that zone, and they're a pretty mainstream monstrous video game. It's like
the other thing is like persistence. Does it handle persistence? Like if you do something in the world, does it stay that way? Even if you leave and come back.
Yeah, that's a pretty key. Really that's a really key feature of Bethesda games, and also why they tend to be buggy and limited. Like that's why I was shocked. That's probably why like 76 has so much respawning in it, and that was a complaint of mine about 76 is the respawning. But I don't know how else you deal with that. You can't nobody has the memory to hold the position of every single physics controlled object like at once.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have enough trouble handling the persistence of your inventory. So.
Right. So then trying to do it to the whole entire game world. Yeah, I don't know. I've just been of the mind of like looking at where the games industry is going. We're getting to a point where graphically we're like hitting peaks of like we're getting into that uncanny valley where it's starting to look like if you try and do it any more realistic, it looks weird.
Yeah.
And so like we're at like a lot of the
Outer Worlds looks kind of an uncanny valley as the NPCs in that.
Yeah, they look. I think
really
that was art. I think they did that intentionally though. Like it has kind of a cartoony art style. I think that's something you almost have to do that in those middling games where they're not super. If you're not the higher end studios, I think like you're risking dating your game automatically by trying to go at the top of the line because you can't release fast enough to like hit the current top of the line. So where if you choose a cartoony art style, then like it won't matter when you release. Like if it takes you 8 years to build your game, like it will still be it still can look decent because you went stylistic. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, for sure. With like the like total cartoony look, like the anything that's animated more or less, will never look dated, right? I think just going somewhat photorealistic with that game though. Like the people are meant to look like people, but I think the faces seem to like be a little bit over the top. Like, and it looked to me like that was an art style choice. Look weird to me.
They definitely look weirder than like Fallout 4's faces. That's for sure.
But we'll see. I'm looking forward to that game.
Yeah, me too. 100%. I'm gonna be snagging that game. That'll be my first day one purchase in a long time. I tend to sit on my hands with games unless they're from Bethesda. Like those Bethesda tend to be the only games I'm like day one gotta have it. Everybody else, I have so much going on in life. I'd rarely have time to grab them. The first or like I don't plan my life around them. But that one's one where I'm like, oh yeah, I got it. It's been too long.
Obsidian, like the last couple games they made, I just didn't interest me just because they're like the top down old school and never got really into those.
Okay,
but just the fact that they've made a game that's like 3D, kind of like a modern type game, definitely want to play that because I've always been a fan. But it's just, I just couldn't play those top-down ones. So.
And you know what's funny? I grew up on those top-down ones. Like Fallout, the first couple of Fallout games were some of my favorite ever. Like when Fallout went to 3D, I was one of those idiots who was pissed off about it. Like, oh, that doesn't match. And then I played it. I was like, okay, this is amazing. But I loved those. But now when I try and play them, like I can't do it. I can't play any of Obsidian's modern releases for that reason. I just can't get into those ISO games. They look beautiful. But like the pacing of them never feels right to me. I never really feel connected to the characters. There's just like I'm very happy with the switch to the modern style with Outer Worlds. I'm glad they're bringing it there, and hopefully they'll do that with the rest of their games. Is like start.
Yeah, I think because they got in touch with like another studio like that is familiar with the Unreal Engine, right?
Right.
So
yeah. Well, I think
looking
I mean,
forward to
they've worked on 3D games before because they did. Well, some number of them who work there did New Vegas, so they worked in 3D before.
yeah, but that was with the Bethesda engine, right?
Right,
That was with
right.
the creation engine. Right?
Well, it's still the same thing. They had to learn that engine. It's not like they had come off of, they didn't make Fallout 3, for example. So like I think it's just like it's a development cost thing. I think it's cheaper to design those ISO games, but I think it's probably gotten to the point now where it's so you can use asset kits to purchase, and like people are just better at it. There's a lot of people do a lot of contract work for like environmental kits, so I think it's just become a lot cheaper to make a 3D game now, and that they can move into that field. That's my estimation of it. Or it could be maybe that's part of the benefit of them joining with Private Division, is that by signing with them they got enough money and resources to do a 3D game. I'm not sure. So, but yeah, excited for that.
Looks good.
It does look good, and they've said that they now, after the community outreach and support from them, they're going to look into potentially adding mod support to it at some point.
Oh, sweet.
But I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different because it's Unreal Engine. It's different than a mod support for like a Bethesda game.
Right, where it's baked right in. Well, yeah, and like I don't know if like they say we'll look into adding mod support. That seems like a tough thing to go retro add. Like Bethesda's whole engine design is built around the idea of everything handling off of plugins overriding each other's forms. So it's built from the ground up to handle mod support. Whereas, if they didn't have that in mind when they were designing Outer Worlds, like they could support mods in the sense of like, all right, if you guys figure out how to like hack into our game, we won't stop you. Like that's what I imagine they're gonna announce.
Because CD Projekt tried to do that with The Witcher and their Red Kit. They called it the Red Kit, and it came out, and it was, it was so confusing. Like I took one look at it. I spent like 2 minutes in the Red Kit. I just like shut it down. So I'm not modding The Witcher. This is impossible. And so I have a similar feeling that it's going to be like that for Unreal Engine. I mean, Unreal Engine is somewhat user friendly. They have I don't know what they're called. Are they called blueprints or
right? The blueprints that to get something up and done quickly. Like you can download chunks of a game.
So where it's a little bit so it's done with like an interface that's like somewhat like easy to understand. Like you don't have to be a script expert or anything.
Right.
So there are certain things that that could streamline it, could make it easier for like regular people like me to use. But if it's like script heavy and stuff like that, like there's no way.
Well, I think one of the advantages to one of those engines like Unity or Unreal is the fact that there are such big communities around them and so many game developers and hobbyists that use them that it's almost like you can just Google the solution to most of your problems. Whereas that does not work so well with the Creation Kit necessarily. Fortunately, there's like a good long-term committed community to it. So, you can tend to find the answers as long as you're willing to dig around in forums. But I've seen that there are so many resources for like Unreal Engine that you can pretty much find the answer. Like the Google bot almost just delivers you your answer because it's so common.
Yeah, if they have like a built-in system that you can use, like if they made, because there's stuff like this for Unreal and Unity, mostly Unity I've found, but they have like an asset that basically makes adding dialogue or adding something very easy and very intuitive. Like you don't need to know how to script, or if you don't need to know how to do anything. If Obsidian releases that for Outer Worlds, like they release their asset to allow you to make dialogue, to allow you to give AI packages and schedules and things like that. If they release that, then it could be a powerful tool. Right. Because that's basically what the Creation Kit is. It's a program that makes the underlying scripting. It's just like it makes it easier. The underlying engine work is more or less it's like what Windows is to DOS, right? Right. So it's if they had that, then I could imagine like it being something that like a lot of people would want to mod. But if it's like the Red Kit, then there's no way.
Well, I think one of the other reasons that Bethesda has been so successful with getting modders on board is they haven't done it much anymore. Like they updated the scripting, but they basically release tutorials themselves. So like whenever they release their kit, they also release a bunch of tutorials on how to do, here's the basic things. And then just doing a handful of those gives players the confidence to experiment with some of the other stuff. But if you're dropped an engine without a lot of simple tutorials, Like it's pretty overwhelming. Like even the creation kit, when I first opened it, it was like, what is this? Like I anticipated having like a 3D world space to navigate around in, and instead it's like all text and things like that, and like dialogues, and like, you know, now that I'm heavily modding, it's like, okay, well that makes total sense. Why you would do that? But in my head, when I first downloaded an editor, I was thinking of something more like, because I first started editing. I think the first game I really got into modding was I want to say one of the, like maybe Warcraft 2. And like when you open that editor, it's just a big green world space, and like you make that connection in your head, like, oh, I'm in a game world. But like the creation kit doesn't do that. You have to manually load the world space, because that's not where most of the modding happens. Most of the modding actually just happens on the records. And I mean, obviously not yours. Your stuff is all about that world space. But it's very jarring you think you're about to work in a 3D game or a 2D game, and then like you're just presented with, here's a list of all the objects in our game. So I think they're all pretty intimidating unless you have some tutorials or guidance.
That is true. They do have that nice little Bendu Olo tutorial on the Bethesda creation kit.
I've found quite a lot of tutorials they've got on there where I'm shocked sometimes when I'm searching up, expecting to get like Nexus forums or Tesla Alliance forums for information, or Lovers Lab very often. That instead, well, occasionally I get creationkit.com. I'm like, oh wow, Bethesda actually did a tutorial, and I don't know how much of that was Bethesda and how much of that was community. Like that could be my mistake as well. It might be that they released none of that, but some of them, the way they're worded, it sounds like it's Bethesda employees trying to explain it to the community.
Yeah, and it's really nice that you could just look up a YouTube, and because there's a long history of modding for the Bethesda games, and most of the engines are pretty similar.
Right.
That you could usually find the solution to whatever problem you're having. It's going to be a little bit different with Unreal and Unity, especially because every game is different. Every game has their own proprietary scripts or whatnot.
Right.
So even though it's the same engine, like, you won't necessarily be able to find the same solution.
That's true.
Or it won't be as easy, but
right. I think
we'll
you can
see.
probably find easy ways to like set up new systems that are standardized. But like then solving the problem within that system is going to be rough, because every game will have its own system over top of it. Yeah.
So yeah, if they basically release something like this is the exact same kit we used more or less to make Outer Worlds, because that's basically what the creation kit is. It's basically the kit that Bethesda developers use to make Skyrim, to make Fallout 4.
Right.
If they gave us something with that much power, then yeah, it's moddable. Anything less, and I don't know, the learning curve is going to be pretty steep.
Right. And I don't know how much of that they planned on. So a lot of times, like, I know when I develop code, I don't ever develop it with the thinking that it's going to get open sourced. So there's like often like notes in there that are only relevant to me, or like to other people that I'm working with, or like chunks of stuff that's like commented out with the like, okay, that didn't work.
Screeds.
Right. Just not stuff you want released to the public.
F-bombs everywhere.
Yeah, that's why I don't curse on my podcast. I do it in my code.
The manifesto. Kinggath's manifesto.
Oh God, let's not even joke about that.
Don't want that stuff getting out.
Right. It's all hidden in the code. But yeah, I don't know how much of that they prepared for. And then there's also the issue of like licensing and stuff. So I think this is often why a lot of game companies don't release stuff. And I think we've even seen that with Bethesda in some case. Like they haven't in the past released all the tools needed to do animation and stuff, and I think that's because, you know, they've got licenses with Havoc or whomever, and they can't release those tools necessarily, which would be required.
Right.
So like in Fallout 4, they released a plugin, but if you look at it, like plugin to export stuff from 3D Max, but if you look at it, you can tell it was made by a foreign developer. Like there's lots of Chinese characters in it. Oh, I might be getting the language wrong. It's in Korean, or I don't know. I'm not good at those characters, but it's definitely an Asian script. And like, so it's like they probably paid some third party developer to be like, hey, can you reverse engineer this thing we've been using, because we can't release the official one, which is amazing that they would do that, because like, you never heard of other gaming companies doing that. Like, hey, let's pay a contractor to make sure modders have this extra tool to do cool stuff with.
Right.
And I could have that wrong. Maybe they did that for themselves and then they released it. Like maybe it was like, because I know there was a bunch of problems with Havoc in particular, because Microsoft bought it. Like it used to be a freebie, and now it's not available anymore.
There's definitely a lot of legal like loopholes with that kind of stuff. So
especially with consoles.
It could go either way.
Like I'd imagine that's probably one of the big reasons we can't put custom assets on PlayStation. There's probably like some special conversion you have to do where they wouldn't allow the general public to have the conversion software or something. That's my assumption. You know, we always just say like you can't have custom assets on PS4. But it's like, well, why? And my best assumption is that there's some sort of conversion you have to do, and Sony won't allow the general public to have the conversion software. That's always been my guess. I don't know what the truth is, and I don't know if I'll ever find out.
Yeah.
But
damn lawyers. And everything.
So you've mentioned a couple of times in our conversation that you said we don't plan this. Do you have like a squad of people you work with, or like, you know, one or two other people you collaborate with all the time, or are you just talking about like your go-to people for voice acting?
Yeah, I think so, because I pretty much do everything myself except for the voice acting. So I'm not sure what I was referring to. Maybe I was just having dissociative identity disorder or something. But
Chris's many personalities.
Yeah,
Kris in danger.
Me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just me and the voice actors for the most part. I mean, there have been some like voice actors who've contributed writing like one quest or one or two quests, or there have been people who have just contributed art. I know for Skyrim there Inda Jones was one person, that's her username, who contributed some art, and then there's some of the musicians like Ronya Monto and Anna Castiglione. They did bard songs for the mod. There was another person. Arison1 is another person who did a bard song, a couple bard songs. She wrote the songs, and a lot of the musicians, they'll perform each other's songs. Giramore is another one. I knew I was leaving somebody out. There's like 4 or 5 musicians more or less, and they'd write a few songs, and then they'd sing them, and they'd like share it among each other and sing the other versions. But
awesome.
As far as just modding or doing anything of that nature, yeah.
All the CK work is on you, and most of the writing.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Pretty much. Well, it's just because the CK in general, I mean, you have to have the plugin, right? You can pass it along to other people, but if you're not on different time zones,
it really doesn't lend itself to collaborative things. I really wish that would be, if I had one like feature request from Bethesda, it would be to like allow their network merging code to work over the internet, because like right now you can kind of set it up, but you have to like set up like a phony local network, and it's real awkward. And I know that Elementor is trying to get better merge support into Xedit to handle it, but there are certain things like I can't even fathom how you would handle them. Like for example, if like what we're doing in some settlements when we have multiple people developing stuff is we just make sure that the things they're working on are completely isolated. So it'll be like, all right, you're working on this quest and it never crosses paths with these characters. But then like once a certain character makes it into a plugin, it's like, okay, well now like only that person gets to work on that plugin, because otherwise it becomes a mess. And like, I don't know, I can't even fathom how Bethesda deals with that. Like, do they have the same limitation? Is it just like certain parts, like the main quest, like John is always in charge of it, and like no matter how complex it gets or how much work it is, only he can do it? Like that seems like a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I mean, but it would almost have to work that way, right? Because you can't edit the same cell at the same time, right? You gotta
well, I mean, if they were non-destructive edits, like kind of like how mods, like we can do additive edits without a problem.
Yeah, that's true.
But like, you know, what if you change like an actor value on the NPC and then passed off to another guy and they didn't make the change? Like, I mean, I guess you can still handle that with merge decisions. You know, kind of like what we have to do in Xedit is decide, you know, which ones overwrite the others in like the load order. It just seems like I have trouble wrapping my head around what kind of workflow would work between multiple people working on the same quest. Like that seems, it just doesn't, I can't fathom a way. And I would love a simple like CK built-in way to handle that, where it was just like you just load in 2 plugins and hit combine and it handles all of that mess for you.
Yeah, they might have something like that, I'm sure. Or they just might have a workflow situation where they just only have one person working on one thing at a time. I mean, I guess that could work too. Right.
Yeah, for me, it's always I always run into thinking about the idea of like, if I have some central NPC to a story, like for example, in our latest expansion, we have a character named Jammer. He's important to like everything. Like he drives the menu system and he's involved in our quest. And so like the idea of having 2 people working on quests that involve him, like I wouldn't even want to risk it. Like I'd be like, inevitably something's going to happen where we can't merge it properly. So like to me, that seems right there as a deal breaker. But maybe that's why Bethesda's games are so compartmentalized, where it's like the main quest is like this tiny little thing running down the center of the game, and then like all the side quests are completely compartmentalized. They're not, they don't interact with the main quest. Maybe that's a workflow thing. It's just like a matter of, it would be too much of a nightmare to have all of these, not to mention extra work, like to have all the extra dialogue and stuff, to have all the things interconnect with each other. But it probably frees them up to work easier if they know, like, this NPC is only ever going to be touched by me.
Right. I mean, I guess you could condition it to where the NPC only says certain dialogue if they are in a specific location. So then that way that this kind of thing this package or this dialogue isn't going to run unless they're doing like my quest. They're not doing another quest. They're not in some other city,
Right.
So, I mean, I guess there are ways to kind of quarantine your work and make it specific to your situation.
Yeah. It could also be one of those things where if you've just got enough experts, like for example, like you and I could probably work together on it and not screw it up, because we would know, like we know all the red flags and like things that could go awry. So like maybe it's just a matter of, it's harder to do if you've got too many people who don't fully understand the system, like you don't fully understand the CK. But like at Bethesda, I'm sure all of their employees are like, can use it like toilet paper. Like it's so automatic to them. I guess that's a weird way to say use it like toilet paper. Usually people say like riding a bike, I went with toilet paper. That's how I must use a lot more than
you
others.
do a specific thing with toilet paper. Usually you use it to like wipe up your shit, and if you use the CK for that, I mean, what do you think about your game?
Maybe that's what I think about the CK. It was my subconscious calling it a toilet, because sometimes it is. Oh man, there are many a days where I've lost hours of work from that damn thing. I would guess you've run into that more often than most, because the objectives tab is particularly unstable in the Fallout 4 CK.
Objectives, it crashes like all the time. You just kind of when you're getting that particular bug, you just kind of have to avoid that until the end and just like
now
do all the other work.
Usually it's like I forget, and then it'll happen like shoot, and then I won't forget for a month, because that'll be a stinging memory. But I still often will find myself like, I'll click on the objectives tab and be like, oh, I didn't save beforehand, and it doesn't crash. I'm like, oh, thank God. Because it's usually like when it happens,
whether to keep going.
Well, then it's just like, okay, I hit okay. Now I hit okay, save, close the CK. It's not worth risking it.
yeah, that's true. You could go one of the directions. Sometimes I feel dangerous, and I feel
you're just gonna risk it.
Add a couple of executives, then hit okay, then save. But because I'm already there. Once you're in the tab,
it seems. To me, it's like as soon as you add an objective, there's a chance that it can go awry. Because I find also like adding aliases to the markers, like that can be a trigger where it goes off. It's scary.
I've had the one where you open it and then it
crashes out.
Crashes.
That's I've run into recently the scariest bug ever, where it zeroes out my file. Like I'll hit save, and then my file will be 0 kilobytes, and I'll have to restore back up.
Oh, yikes!
Yeah, that's like whoa. Well, that's not a good bug, because that could wipe out. That could wipe out months of work if I'm not careful.
That's something I get in the habit of doing, is just making copies of my plugin. It's just like random copies. Just whenever, just in case, just in case it fucking goes nuclear or whatever. I
tend to do that also in case I get overzealous going down a path of trying something and it doesn't work, and I'm like, I don't want to have to remember what records I had just made.
Definitely do that. Definitely when you're about to try something risky you've never done before, you don't know what's gonna happen, you definitely got to make a copy. Of the
good practices.
Plugin first.
Oh man, so that's impressive that you do all of this stuff by yourself. Because like that's
it just means I have a lot of time on my hands.
So one of the things I've been
way of saying you have no life. It's impressive. I can see the air quotes coming through.
Oh no, man, I can't talk. I release patches to my mods every 2 weeks, and clearly every moment of free time I have goes into this. So I'm with you there, buddy.
Can't really knock it. It's what we enjoy doing. Might as well just keep doing it.
It's super addictive too. Like. It tends to just replace all of the time I used to use to play games, because it's like it scratches an itch that games can't anymore. Like my first time playing through a Bethesda game, it has the same feel to me of like I'm exploring something new. It's all new and it's exciting. And then after that, then it's like the creation kit becomes that for me. And it's like, all right, well that's what I need.
It's just way more fun to. I don't know, maybe it's not more fun, maybe that's the wrong word, but it's just it fulfills that need, like you said.
I think it's a more fulfilling fun. Like it's sometimes it can be
For sure.
sometimes, and especially like after you get to like one of those sections of your development where all you have left is the work, and you grind through all that work, and maybe take you 20 or 30 hours, and then you get to come out on the other side, play it, and it all works. And it's like, oh, that felt so worth it.
Yeah, there's definitely something that is more fulfilling about creating than simply just playing something passively. It's just it's different because you made this, it's just
Right.
the fruit of your labors versus the fruit of somebody else's labors, but you just enjoy it, so, which is fun too. But
Yeah, for a different reason. Like I find it's fun to me. It's like the novelty thing of like it's fun to experience something new for the first time. Whereas like
yeah, exactly.
but like I never get a lot of joy out of like building in Minecraft. But I get unlimited joy building in the CK. Like I can build little buildings all day long and have a blast with it. And I don't know why. Like it's basically the same motions of like I'm just choosing arbitrary blocks and mashing them together.
But it's being put into a world that has a more engaging story, I guess. It's put into a living, breathing thing, whereas Minecraft, it just feels like feels artificial. I don't know.
Sure.
It feels less like a space that is alive.
I guess it's kind of tied to my same complaint about 76 is like I'm doing all the same quests, the same fetch quests and kill quests, but they're not as satisfying because I don't have a world of NPCs that care about it. Whereas and that's kind of what's going on in Minecraft too. There's nobody who cares about your fantastic machine and giant village you built out of a mountain. Like,
whereas in Fallout or Skyrim, it's like not only is the world itself alive and dynamic, it's like you have more players who enjoy it, who have their own personal experiences, and their existence is more or less in the game. So it's just
yeah. Oh man, I
I
love these games so much. I cannot wait to see what their next single player thing is, because I think you hit the nail on the head that with the changing genres is such a huge boost for creativity. To prevent people from getting stagnant. Sure. And I think that was probably one of the problems with them jumping right into 76 is you've got all this team that are probably burned out with new ideas. I'll ask them to go, all right, now take the same general ideas and repeat them again. So I think that's one of the reasons Bethesda jumps between and takes so long between games. But I had the thought the other day, I bet they also do it to make players clean their palate of just
True. I'm tired of just playing Fallout games after playing Fallout 4 and 76. I'm as a player, not just as a modder, I'm ready for something different.
Sure.
People are just saying, oh, we want another Fallout game, we want another TS game. I'm ready for Starfield. I'm ready to go to space.
Yeah.
So just give me something different.
I'm ready for that. I'm also personally ready for another TES game. It's been so long since I played Skyrim. I'm actually getting a little hungry to do so. I found myself the other day, I kicked on a 10-hour tavern music playlist just so that I could feel like I was in Skyrim while I was working. And so just jumping between the genres as a player feels really awesome to cleanse your palate. Because even there's only if you play New Vegas and 3 and 7 and 4 and 76, they all feel different, but they also have a lot of elements that are exactly the same.
Yeah.
To where it starts
Whereas Elder Scrolls, the lands are so different.
The lands are so different. Right? I mean, even the interface is different. There's very little. You could the only thing I think that carries between them is the crappy melee combat and the feel of the NPCs' movement. Their animations look similar, and they have the same general pathing issues to them, and there's that feel of you're watching scenes play in the world instead of all cutscene-y. That has a similar feel to it. But other than that. Skyrim and Fallout 4 I can't imagine them feeling more different as a player.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm looking forward to, especially if it's some place like Black Mars. I doubt they'll do Black Mars, but or even what's the other one?
Doesn't everyone think they're doing Hammerfall? Or Hammerfell rather?
Yeah.
Isn't that what the thought is?
Hammerfell's probably it, just because it's humans. The two places they're probably not going to do are Elsewhere because it's mostly Khajiit, and Black Marsh because it's mostly Argonian, and they're not gonna do what's the other one, the Bosmer one, Valenwood. They're not gonna do Valenwood because it's just a logistical nightmare. They have moving cities. They have, unless they're just gonna like trample on the lore,
Right.
which they can do. But I don't think they're gonna do Valenwood just because of the logistics of having the moving cities.
It might be one of those things where we get for like
lore.
TES 8 or something once the technology is there, because like that's the other thing is a lot of this. Every time technology evolves, we get better computers on average, and now like with this new thing Google announced, that could be a total like industry changer in the sense that like potentially everybody for $15-20 a month can have access to a supercomputer. Like that totally opens up the developer possibilities of like what you can pull off.
Yeah, that's all dependent on internet connection though, right?
True. You would always have a problem with
extreme.
people out in the sticks, or even anywhere in the U.S. because our internet sucks. But but yeah, that's that. But that might, that's the type of thing that might inspire people to fix infrastructure problems with the internet. Like if there's such a hunger for this, it's like this is the gaming has become a primary entertainment source for millions and millions of people. It's kind of like how like porn can lead change to technology. Like enough people want their boobies, so it can shift shift priorities in a nation, and like then all of a sudden DVD becomes the standard. Like you could have the same thing going on with the internet as like or with gaming rather as gaming
VR porn and VR, man, that's gonna be the future.
And when you combine them together, that's exactly. But I'm saying I think that
never
could be
leaving the house.
Never leaving the house, right? I think that those could be enough of a driver to force like fiber connections to become more of a mainstay. Like they would just drive a huge draw for them, or huge. I think there's already a huge market for that for people. Like people are hungry to get reasonably cost fiber, and I think the reason we don't have it is because of all the regulations and stuff, and not to mention the amount of money it would cost to like. Can you imagine like having to go like tear up all of New York City and like run new lines? Exactly. Like that's a lot. That's a big deal. So like that's one of the inhibitors, but I think there's enough money in the gaming industry where you might see that happen. There's enough money there to inspire somebody to do that.
Yeah,
because
Hammerfell is probably like a good bet simply because that they're one of the nations that have fought back against the Thalmor invasion or whatnot. So, going back to Elder Scrolls, I definitely think it's probably going to be Hammerfell. I would agree with you there, just based on all the hints in Skyrim. But it's also because it's a human province, and the human ones are usually the ones that are easier to sell. It's hard to sell a game full of lizards.
Right. It's probably getting easier for them, though, after how popular the game has become. Like they're like Elder Scrolls after Skyrim like blew up. Like everybody knows about Skyrim. So like I think it'll slowly open the opportunities for them to get a little weird. But I do remember the very first time I played. Like Morrowind was the first one I played of theirs, and the one I ran into Khajiit, it was really weird and it felt kind of silly. Like I was used to elves in high fantasy, so I was like, okay, no problem there. But the Khajiit, I'm like, that feels like kind of throwaway. Like they were just trying to like capture the cat audience of the internet.
The furries.
Right. It was like, this is weird that there's cat people. And even in Skyrim, I always felt like they felt out of place. I didn't play much Oblivion. I downloaded it, but it came out at the height of my worst World of Warcraft addiction, so I never really gave it a fair shot.
It's a good game. You should definitely
I tried to play it like 2 years ago. It did not age well. It did not age well.
Sky Oblivion, I guess, might come out.
Yeah, when that comes out in 10 years, or inevitably gets ported over to TES 6 because they didn't get it out in time.
Yeah.
And I give them crap for it, but like I understand how hard it is to do. Like that project is
no, it would be Hammer Oblivion.
Right. Switch over to Hammer Oblivion. Like mad props to them for trying to take on something like that, but it just seems like those projects end up getting stuck in development hell. And I can understand like you're rebuilding an entire game like that took an industry like a team of 100 professionals to do over a course of 4 or 5 years, and you're trying to knock it out with probably less than half that volunteers. Like it's a pretty big undertaking. Anyway, but yeah, that is kind of where I'm hoping to actually experience Oblivion. And I remember the biggest thing that killed me on Oblivion, it wasn't necessarily the graphics. I can deal with bad graphics in a game. It was the bow. The bow mechanics were so terrible.
Oh, yeah.
And there's probably a mod to fix it. I just but when I turned on the game, I was like, I tried to use a bow as an archer character, and I'm like, nope, can't do it. Not after Skyrim.
Yeah. All the old Bethesda games, they didn't really age well from a combat perspective. Like Morrowind is probably the worst one. Oblivion is pretty bad. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think that's why like when Todd Howard says he doesn't want to do remasters of his games, it's like, no, we want better combat, buddy. We want to experience those worlds, but like modernized in gameplay.
Yeah, it's just the work.
Yeah.
I have enough trouble as it is for myself going back to like the old things that I've done. Usually you just put them in the rearview mirror and just move on to the next thing. You want to kind of spend time working on new things rather than rehashing the old. And so I could see it from that perspective. Like I wouldn't want to, I don't know, I wouldn't want to go back to something old and just
right, like you wouldn't want to have to go rebuild interesting NPCs. If for example, SSE didn't allow for porting forward mods, like I doubt there's no way you would have gone through and rebuilt the thing from scratch for that, right?
No, there's no way. There's no chance. It's just like when you're in it and you're like motivated and passionate, it's the easiest thing in the world. When you're like sort of moved on and it's like in the rearview mirror, it's just like it's just the hardest thing to just pick it up. So
yeah. It's one of those ironies. So like we talk about, I feel like there's a general talk in the gaming world and like the podcasts or YouTubers and stuff about talking about how they don't want to see publishers just doing these money grabs, but a remake would only be a money grab because there's not going to be any creative passion in it. It's just like what we were talking about at the beginning, where we're just like, sometimes we have to just take time to do stuff that's fun for us. Like if we're only doing the work, it's not good enough. And like the only reason to do the remake, the only value that would come out of that would be a financial motivation. There would be no passion there. So like it's kind of like going against what we say we want. Like we're like we want developers who like pour their hearts into things and don't just try and squeeze a buck out. But it's like, but we also want remakes, and it's like those two things are totally against each other. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, the other thing you could do, I guess, is outsource and have somebody else remake and do the work. But then at the same time, you don't want somebody else putting like their hands on your baby. So it's I can see why they would be against that also. It's like, because you often see these like fan projects where they try to remake a popular game, but the studio will squash it down. Like, and it's usually, it's not exactly up to par either. It's like the fan projects, they're made by fans, so it's not like necessarily professionally done. So you could see why they would just want to squash it on that alone.
I think most of those are lawyers squashing it though. I don't think it's often like the creative people stopping it. I think the creatives would feel like what you just said of like, it would probably be better to just outsource that and let them do the work, since they like, I think it would be like, that seems like great intern work. Like, here's your way to learn how to make a game. You're going to remake our game, which will be profitable for us so that we can pay you to learn. And then you get good experience, and we know the product will be solid because we've already done it, and the player base likes it. So it's like a win-win there. That seemed to me like an awesome a training project for your new employees. Like, instead of grabbing all those new employees and putting them on Fallout 76, here, you guys are going to remake Fallout 3 from scratch. Like, you have all the voice files, like you know exactly, you have a reference material, you can go boot up the game and see what you're supposed to do at each point. Have fun. Like, you got a year, go.
Yeah, if it's more or less scale, like 1-to-1, like they're just basically copying it, for sure. I think if there's decisions that have to be made, they put their own spin on it, like they have to, because the engines are different, because the combat's different, like sometimes you just can't trust people, with things that are important to you, but also you don't have the passion to work on it. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I could feel that.
It really depends on the situation.
I think a lot of these teams are having to deal with that with like Sky Oblivion, as we said, or the Fallout 3 remake or Fallout 4 remake for FO4 is they're going to have to make certain gameplay decisions that are going to steer the project against what its original incarnation was. So. And we're counting on them to get it feeling good, because like I don't think anybody wants to go back to Fallout 3 combat. Like I think it's universal agreement that Fallout 4's gunplay is 100% better than Fallout 3's.
Exactly.
So like some decisions are easy to make, but you still do have to make those decisions. There's still certain things that don't match up perfectly, or but I would definitely advocate for anybody doing remakes to try and keep it as framework like as possible, where your changes are very minimal to the core gameplay loop, and then especially in a modding scene, is to allow players then to like mod the game to make the changes they want. So like maybe you disagree with a developer decision in the original game, let the players choose which of those they go with. So
yeah, and I definitely think with games, like if we're talking about like Fallout 3, you're talking about like Oblivion, they're not so old. to where like there's like a real change to the core gameplay or just the core story or anything.
Right.
But like games like that are Super NES or NES games that are super old, and you're trying to like turn it into a 3D game or you're trying to modernize it. That's probably where it gets a lot more tricky. But yeah, Oblivion to Skyrim, there's not that much difference, so you should be able to make it work, I guess.
Yeah, I think they'll make it work, but I still there's some changes that have definitely occurred in it. As far as like just like the movement mechanics, or like for example, if you bring Morrowind into
Morrowind especially, the dialogue system,
right, the dialogue system,
yeah.
or like the mini game in the Oblivion dialogue system. Like there's a bunch of things I don't know how they would translate over, or the custom spell. Like,
Morrowind,
can you do the custom spell system from Morrowind as advanced? Could you do that in Skyrim?
You'd probably just have to port like the straight Skyrim system over. I mean, you could just basically just have Skyrim spells and gameplay and just ignore that aspect of Morrowind. But the dialogue is, I don't know how you do that. You click on a button, you get like 2 paragraphs worth of text to read, right?
Yeah.
And every NPC has the same button, same like link. Like you click on something about Solstheim, they all say the same thing, and it's like 2 paragraphs worth or something. Like that is not something you can really translate to a modern game. So that's where you have to make decisions, because you have to write different dialogue.
Right.
And so it gets tricky. That's a game where I can see Bethesda not wanting people to make they wouldn't trust to other people. Right. They would only be willing to do it themselves.
Well, I mean,
it really depends.
In that particular case, they know that the passionate fans who are really into Morrowind are going to happily just play any of these remakes that are getting done by mod teams, and they don't seem to be shutting them down, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
I'm very excited to see some of those come to light, because have we had any of them? Have any of them succeeded yet? So like I know Skywind and Skyblivion have been in development for a long time. It seems to me that the one I can think of is Tale of Two Wastelands happened. Like that successfully ported Fallout 3 forward to Fallout New Vegas' improvements. But other than that, I can't think of any games that have succeeded in this super ambitious idea of essentially doing a fan remake.
What about the one that put Morrowind in Oblivion's engine?
Did that ever get finished? I don't know. I never
Oblivion.
Because I never played Oblivion much. I never followed their mod scene.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't think so. I guess none is the answer.
Right. That's what I'm like. It sounds awesome, and I've seen screenshots of them, and they're doing amazing work. Like seeing screenshots from Morrowind built in Skyrim looks incredible. But it feels like a pipe dream for it to ever actually see the light of day. Like even some of these full big mods, like where they're world space mods with things like Project Brazil, which became New California. Like the fact when that got released, I was so blown away. I immediately went and donated them a bunch of money because I was so happy to see that it happened. Like, oh my God, it's real. You guys did it. No, you're heroes.
Part of the problem is that the new games come out by the time the old projects are finished, more or less, right? So I'm sure the Morroblivion crew, it's hard to say, by the time they were almost finished, like Skyrim came out, and they're like, oh, wait, we should probably port it to the newer game.
Right. So, well, that's what I assumed happened. I assumed more Oblivion became Skywind is what I assumed happened, right. But I don't know that for sure. Because, again, I never followed that scene particularly close. Yeah, but it would that would kind of scratch that itch for people, so that Bethesda doesn't need to do it then if they know that those mods are actually going to happen. But I was just thinking, I don't know that there is a guarantee they will happen, because we don't have any track record. We don't know that, if it were the case of every single Elder Scrolls game had successfully been ported forward and it was just a matter of time, kind of like how we know there will always be an unofficial patch. That's just never not going to happen. We can't say the same for these fan remakes.
That's true. And plus, in terms of just player base, I mean, they have to be on consoles to reach the most fans, right? Consoles are going to dwarf the PC sales.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think, I think a lot of the requirements, I know for a fact that the Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas remasters are going to require F4 SE, because they need those massive UI overhauls, and you just can't do that otherwise.
Yeah.
To add in the skill systems and stuff. So like they're automatically capped at the PC audience. So the PC audience is getting bigger. Like if you look at the percentage of users since Twitch became a thing, like the PC use has spiked dramatically again. So it like,
Oh, really?
Like there was a time where it was like console became the majority, then mobile became the majority, and now it's becoming more like a split. So like the PC race is going, the PC master race is getting quite big again. And I think it's thanks to streaming, because you watch all these streamers playing these hardcore games and they're getting, they're doing really well and they get to play on the highest settings. I think the people who are watching that get jealous of that and they're more likely to invest in the PC. And like I think any gaming enthusiast would say like PC is the only way to play. Like if you are a true gamer, you're going to do it on PC. Whereas like before, like gaming wasn't as when gaming wasn't as mainstream, a console was a way to bring it. Console kind of became like the bait to bring in new players, and then like once they became hooked, then it's like, all right, well, if I really want to be a gamer, I got to do it on PC. That's kind of I think that's kind of what happened. And so like if you look at the charts of like what's most popular, it's PC is climbing up really fast again, and mobile still like makes up like half the market.
Yeah, and not just graphics, but performance-wise, like especially like aiming with a mouse and a keyboard is just superior to.
Yeah, it's funny. I used to be a junkie because I grew up playing FPSs on PC and was a huge mouse and keyboard guy. And then I took a break from gaming for a few years and ended up with an Xbox somehow. And like then now I prefer a controller. Like even though.
Oh really?
Yeah, like even though you can't, like I think the skill cap is much. Like you can get much better with a mouse and keyboard. I don't play enough online games to care. So like I'm just comfortable with a controller in my hand now, which is weird. I never thought that would happen because I felt like you just said, was like you can't get better than a mouse and keyboard. Like now I don't care about being better. I just want to relax. Give me a controller.
Yeah, that's true. You could also use VATS too. If I had a controller, I would just use VATS.
Yeah, I do find myself using probably VATS more than most, especially even if it's just to like toggle it on to get a target, then toggle it off again.
Right.
It's almost like cheat. It's like cheat mode, like the quick, which is how you have to use it in 76. Like you just find your targets.
It's good for knowing when there's hostiles around you. It's just,
right.
Spam the fuck out of VATS fucking keyboard, and it's just yeah.
Oh,
I know a guy's there because I didn't see him, but the VATS saw him. So
that's probably how they came up with the idea for real-time VATS. They're like, don't we just use it all the time just to find a target? Like we could still do that, which is pretty accurate.
Yeah, a lot of people complained about it, but I find it pretty useful just to spam the VATS key, and then that's how I get through the wasteland. I don't have to aim at anything. I just spam the VATS key. Shoot things that way.
Well, I think that's immersive in the sense the idea was it's supposed to be a targeting computer. It would hopefully have some sensors to find enemies near you.
Yeah, it works. Yeah. Plus makes the game easier.
It does make the game easier. And I don't think most of us are looking, well, some people are. Some people are looking for crazy difficulty in these Bethesda games. You look at all the mods that inevitably come out to like jack up the difficulty, like I find most of them just make it tedious as opposed to making it more difficult. Like games like Frostfall and stuff, where I'm just like, oh, I don't want to have to worry about my warmth or eating food. Like, I just want to, I want to just kill bad guys and play more quests. But that's
especially if the game isn't designed for difficulty. Like, there's games like Dark Souls, those From Software games where they're designed to. The enemies have different attack types, and you have to figure out different ways of dodging or countering the attacks and stuff. Whereas a lot of times with Bethesda games, making it harder is just meaning you got to hit it like 10 more times.
Right.
Like, you got to hit the enemy like more.
Or you make it so that like you die if you take a shot, and then it's like then that becomes more Dark Souls like, but there's not the intricacy of like doing that combat dance, which is really what makes it exciting.
Exactly.
And I think that's why. In general, I think there's a big people get turned off by the difficulty curves that all they do is ramp up enemy damage and health. It's like, not like that's such a cheap way to do a difficulty curve because it takes them no effort. It's like literally they inject a new menu and apply like a global modifier to numbers, and it's like that was it. That's all you could be bothered to do. It's like why bother putting in a difficulty level at that point? Because you just make the game unfun. Like I find very hard mode in Fallout is unplayable. Because the enemies are so bullet spongy. It's like, this isn't fun. That's not what I want to play.
Yeah.
At least survival is like, both sides do crazy amounts of damage. So like there's, high risk of death. But I don't feel like I'm like having to unload, full clips into every enemy. So
that would definitely get tedious.
it does get tedious. But I think it's a pretty common scaling method that games use. And so personally, I just like never, when I play a new game, I never take it off of normal difficulty because I assume that's what's going to happen if I up the difficulty is I'm just going to end up dealing with bullet sponges.
Oh yeah. I used to always play on normal, but now I've given in. I play on easy mode.
Oh, you can go right to easy. I haven't done that yet. That's
yeah. It's just like I don't care about, like, I don't want to get good at video games.
Sure.
It's a completely useless skill. So
it's true.
I just want to enjoy myself. So I just figured easy mode. I mean, normal is pretty easy anyway.
Right.
So I mean, I could probably do it on normal, but yeah. The stigma is gone for me.
All right, go straight to easy. So yeah, my assumption is always that they designed the fun around normal. Like they probably played. That's exactly how the developers played the game most of the time. Would have been on what they consider normal difficulty. But that might not be true for every developer. It might be that some developers develop around like their hard mode and then they scale it back before release. I don't know. I think it's probably on each developer to decide.
And they might be good at video games.
They might be good at video games. So. True. Yeah. Like I'd imagine. I would like to think that most of the people at. But see here, I was going to say most people at Bethesda are very good at their games, but I'd realized when I started doing a Let's Play for YouTube of Fallout 4, I'm terrible at Fallout 4. I get killed all the time, and it's like it doesn't matter that I develop for the game every single day. I suck at it. So.
Yeah.
Maybe normal difficulty is so easy to us because the developers don't play enough games.
No, yeah, it could be.
Could be. Interesting.
But yeah, I've definitely, like, the thrill of completing a very hard video game, it's completely gone for me. So I just get frustrated. So now I just, I mean, I'm sure if you had the time to like develop your skills and
right.
you worked on it, you get the feeling of accomplishment. It's really satisfying. But it's just like, do I want to work on it?
Right.
Do I want to spend like hours and hours on this skill that is going to be slightly satisfying, but in the end will probably be completely meaningless to me? But yeah,
right.
it's different. I have modding to satisfy my crave for difficult challenges.
Yeah,
so.
I feel you on that. That's why I don't tend to try getting good at multiplayer games anymore. Like I'll go through binges occasionally where I'm just like, I am gonna get to Legend in Hearthstone, where I just really want that competition. But most of the time, I'll start going and I'll get in the upper ranks where it becomes, either a coin flip or I get my ass kicked, and then I'm just like, yeah, do I really care enough to put in the extra hours it's gonna take to get past this skill gap? Like, probably not. Probably not.
I mean, if you translate it to sports, I mean, you're never going to be good enough to make a living at it. You're not going to be good enough to play competitively. I mean, it does make it somewhat more fun if you're good at something. Like if you're really good at basketball, you go to the local park and you play. It does make it more fun. So there is something that is beneficial in a way.
Right.
So I can see how you would like to train those skills if you played a lot of multiplayer, if you played a lot of competitive gameplay in a community. But if you're playing a single player game, yeah, you're just by yourself. So you get the same thrills bashing super mutants in easy mode as you do in normal mode, very hard mode. So
I bet there's a lot of people who will argue with that sentiment, but I feel you of like there's not a lot. I don't find a lot of joy in it either. But I think that for me the multiplayer, the thrill went away when we switched to multiplayer game, like online gaming. Like when it was like couch gaming, it was fun to like practice and get better, so the next time your buddies come over you can kick their asses. Like that was a lot of fun.
For sure.
And like without that element, like I mean there is I can still like connect with my buddies over the internet, but it's not even close to the same as like couch gaming used to be or LAN party gaming.
Oh yeah, like just playing Street Fighter or something, or just playing what's that game, Red Alert on the PC.
Oh yeah,
LAN party or whatever.
Yeah, wait,
there was that's fun.
That kind of competition was where I love, and there's the camaraderie of just being around, hanging out, and you said at the beginning you grabbed some pizza. I was like that's what I would love to get gaming back to, of like pizza LAN parties where we're just all hanging around, nerding it up, playing games against each other. Like that sounds like heaven to me.
Yeah, and the single player challenge is fun if it's actually something that you have to think about. I'm sure like Dark Souls, I haven't played much of the Dark Souls, like those kind of games. I played like old school NES games like that were super hard, like Ninja Gaiden was like one of those ones that were just super difficult, and it's like fun like to kind of like solve that challenge and get good at it. Right. But I don't think very hard mode in Fallout is like takes a lot of brain power. It just means you got to stay in cover longer.
Right.
right? It's
Yeah.
just and shoot him a couple more times, right? So for those kind of games, yeah, like I said, I stand by my statement. Easy mode.
Easy mode
all
is the way to go.
Just,
So Outer Worlds comes out, slam that easy mode button.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, it depends. Is the game gonna be like something where changing it to hard mode is dynamic in terms of just the difficulty?
Right.
Or is it just gonna be more bullet sponges?
Right. I think this is one of those things
bars.
where it depends on the developer. I think a lot of developers go the lazy route, and then others probably get I bet From Software is very well known for their difficulty levels. I bet if you crank up the difficulty level on Dark Souls, it has a particular experience you can anticipate. Like I'm not much of a Dark Souls player either. I have a friend who swears by From Software. He's like, all of their games are like, he's like, that's what all games need to be. He's like, there's something lost in the gaming world by everything trying to cater to the mass audience. He's like, games are better if they're skill intensive. I'm like, all right, well, that's one argument. I don't agree with it, but I'm not quite where you're at with easy mode, but I don't find a thrill in dying 40 times in a play session.
Yeah.
So
especially if you don't have the time for it. It's
Right.
different if you're a kid.
Exactly.
Like when I was a kid, I had the time to invest in it. And then like the challenge was beatable. It was doable.
Right.
Like I could finish the game and I could get good. But now it's just I don't have the time to get good.
Yeah, I think that's probably the reason games tend to go easier is because I think you've got two audiences. You've either got the non-game player; they're not going to want a real hard challenge. They're going to want something they can ease themselves into, and then you've got people like us who are aging out of the time to do it. To where it's like we want to experience the world and we want to see the story, but do we have time to like repeat the same sections over and over again? And yeah, I definitely don't. Like I think I have. Like because of all the time I'm putting into modding, I usually can squeeze in like maybe 4 hours of gaming a week, which, actually, if I said that to some of the professionals I work with, they'd be like, "You have 4 hours a week to waste time? Like, wow, how did you do that?"
And the constant dying also kind of takes away from the story. That you're trying to play this game for the story and experience, but if you're constantly dying and resetting the world, it feels more gamey. You know
Right. Yeah, it doesn't feel like a continuous story. If yeah, definitely, it's a little unimmersive if you just die and hit reload.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm playing a game. I don't know what the alternative to that would be. I guess that can be where some of the fun with like alternative death methods could be.
Yeah, exactly.
Into play.
If it's built into the story, there's like some games that are really good with that. Like BioShock, I think, is one where, from what I recall, like dying is just like you just go to like a pod or something. Right,
and your body is like rebuilt or whatever. Yeah, I don't remember how that worked, but I do remember it being a very clever solution to death. That can.
So if it's like that, then yeah, dying is just fine. Like I think the From Software games do that. I'm not completely sure, but I think they build it in because they know you're gonna die a lot.
Sure. So they build it right into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, so we heard it here. Kris Takahashi, easy mode player, noob level.
Yes.
So I think I said Takahashi. Sorry. So I'm looking forward to Outer Worlds. You're looking forward to Outer Worlds. We're both looking forward to, and everybody's looking forward to, I think, the next single player from Bethesda. And hopefully they'll make an announcement soon, like to give us more details, because I think after 76, like they're looking for a win. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at E3 now that we know they're going to be there.
That's right. They did announce something like "Be Together" or something.
Right. So it'll be interesting if they're going to do anything, or if they're, because I remember in 2017 I was super disappointed that there was nothing from Bethesda, because now that I hate that they call the bigger company Bethesda. Like, because then I always want it to be Bethesda Game Studios, and you always want it to be Elder Scrolls Fallout guys, and instead it's like all those other studios who I don't care about. Like some of those games are great. Right. Like Dishonored was an awesome game. The new Rage 2 looks pretty cool, but like I don't particularly care about any of those studios. I only care about Bethesda Game Studios. So then it's like it could be that one year. I think it was 2017. There was nothing from Game Studios, other than I think they announced Creation Club. And other than that, there was nothing from them, so it was like super disappointing. So I wonder if that's going to happen again. If like 2019 is just going to be,
isn't that what it's like? People are expecting it to be. Is that they're not going to talk anything about like any Bethesda Game Studio games, but just third-party games? Yeah,
maybe it might be as a way to like you kind of got to lie low while people are getting over their lumps from 76. Yeah,
because just from a timeline perspective, they haven't even. I mean, they last year they announced Starfield and TSX, but they hadn't like started working on them, right?
Well, I
Hypothetically.
think that they had been working on them for a while. I think Starfield they'd been working on.
Oh, okay.
And like Tez is just like a blink, like because I think I've read or I've seen interviews with Todd Howard where he says they've been working on Starfield for a long time. I think they said they started working on it as soon as Fallout 4 was released. So that would be since 2015. So like we could be into a point where like it could come out next year, like realistically.
Oh, well, in that case, yeah, we might see something from Starfield. That would be cool.
That'd be very cool. Although
I had just assumed that they had nothing because last year's trailer had nothing to show.
Right.
So I kind of assumed they were still just like in the beginning stages.
Well, I would think it might be they
yeah.
don't want to like they didn't want to take away the thunder from 76. Like if they like like the teasers were enough to get everybody like, oh heck yeah, they're doing like it's happening, like it's a real game. But if they had showed gameplay footage, then it would have been like, oh well, who cares? We don't care about the 76 crap. Like give us more intel on that game. Like it might have just been a marketing decision to kind of keep all that under wraps. I don't really know.
Gotcha. But now that 76 is released, they could show footage, you think?
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe not. Maybe they'll just do another like 2017 where it's just like show off all the other game studios. Like obviously we've got Doom Eternal coming out and Rage 2. So, actually no, Rage 2 will be out by then because I think Rage 2 comes out in May and then E3 is in June.
Didn't like the marketing picture that they showed like didn't it have a picture of space like or like a couple people
it was like all their characters silhouettes on it like it had, but I think they do that all the time. All of their marketing materials have the characters. Like I think even in 2017 there was like a Vault Boy you could find in the materials even though there was nothing from Fallout. Like I think they tend to they're just trying to treat them all like mascots, so it's
But the fact that they had the night sky and all the stars in the sky, wouldn't that be a Starfield?
Hopefully,
no,
like I would love to see that we've got a new like kick-ass single player game on the way. I haven't played a lot of space games to be honest with you, so like that really excites me to go play something like that from them. Like in the in the engine we're used to, like because it'll have certain mechanics you can expect. I imagine like the tin can thing, like that unique to Bethesda thing that we can expect.
Yes.
We'll be able to pick up the space cans,
yes,
and put them on heads.
Will they have their space gravity though, or is it just going to be
that could be something that's fun. Is in a Bethesda game, then you add in anti-gravity to it. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Because that's something we don't have a lot of. We've never really been able to control much of is gravity. It's always it's a real pain in the ass to mess with like jump height and flying and stuff. So
that would be interesting. It'd be interesting how they manage the whole sort of. I mean, I guess they could do it like separate world spaces, like going from planet to planet. It's like going from the Commonwealth to Far Harbor. But Bethesda games are known for just their open world, just the one big world that is just like a seamlessly integrated.
Right.
So that will be interesting because Mass Effect was like a big space game, but the BioWare strategy is always to just have these separate world spaces and you hop to each one.
To me, I think that's the only realistic solution. Like if you look at games like No Man's Sky, like they just have like the only way you can really do these giant universes is that each world itself is going to be kind of dead or eventually feel gamey. Because like you don't like how many people would it take? How big of a team would you need to like populate an entire planet, much less 100 planets? So like even in like their solution for Mass Effect was that you could go down to the world, but it was just all procedurally generated, and like primarily instead what you would do would be like you did the scanning thing in Mass Effect 2 where you were just like you're doing the mining for your most of the planets, and then occasionally there would be one with like one little hub you did quests in. And I think that's really the only realistic way to make something fun, because the alternative to that is No Man's Sky. And like I hear the second launch of that was cool, but I think even those players are eventually going to start to feel like, oh, it's all gamey and procedurally generated, and like once you figure out the system in your head, it loses its luster real quick.
Yeah, the one thing weird about space games is that you go to different planets, but all the planets are basically the size of like one small area.
Right.
Because if you think about how diverse the Earth is, how many different biomes we have.
Right.
But if we were a planet in a space game, we'd be like tropical planet or like
right,
desert planet,
right. Yeah, that is weird how we do that.
Yeah, but so I was thinking one possibility could be we could have a Bethesda game that just it takes place entirely in a continuous world like the Commonwealth, like Skyrim. It's just on a different planet, or it's just on a space station, or it's just where you don't travel to different world spaces. I mean, you could in DLC, but maybe like the main world is like that big. It's large in a Bethesda way. It's an open world in a Bethesda way. And then you have like side missions to other world spaces, side missions to other planets, but there is a main space that makes it feel like a Bethesda game.
Yeah, that's what I would anticipate too. Or like it's just set in a sci-fi universe, and maybe you can go fly up to a space station, but for the most part, it's still grounded on some world. Yeah, that's what I anticipate out of that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what their take is on that genre, because like I don't see them going like No Man's Sky route. That doesn't feel like Bethesda to go super procedurally generated. They seem to go with they like to do their hand placed things. Lots of like little story vignettes to find. Like that seems more up their alley.
And it'd be interesting to see what kind of futuristic world. Is it like cyberpunk, like 2077? Is it a future world in terms of just like a space opera type future world, like a Star Wars kind of future
world? Or is it Star Trek-y, which super sterile, high tech? Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see which way that could be the type of thing they could reveal at E3, even if they weren't ready, like if they didn't have a ship date for a year and a half. I personally would like to see all games go to the Apex model, where they just like announce and release that day. Like it's just like, oh hey, here's a new game we made, enjoy. Like that's what I want to see.
They more or less tried that with Fallout 4. I mean, it wasn't the same day, but they released it that year. Like nobody knew anything about Fallout 4.
Right.
And then they're like, they announced it at E3, and they're like, hey, and by the way, this is coming out this November. And it was like really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if they did that with 76.
Well, yeah, they did the same thing with 76. They announced it and then released it in November. So they did the same pattern. But Todd Howard is on record saying he would like to get it as tight as possible. So like, I'm hoping he saw them do it with Apex and it's like, we need to do that. That would be amazing. Because that would take to me that's an awesome marketing strategy, because you don't, I mean, I from what I've heard is Apex kind of cheated that they paid all the big Twitch players like $1 million each to like play the game like crazy, so they ended up having a massive marketing budget. But I feel like a company like Bethesda could get, like, who has such a huge good reputation, I think if they just released a game and spent $0 on marketing, people would just go ape shit and like would buy the crap out of it. Like I would immediately go buy the highest available edition of Starfield if you told me it was available right now. I would do it sight unseen. Be like, done, give me it. Let's play this.
But we do that anyway.
Right.
The question is, would the casual person do it?
Right. Well, I think anybody who's a fan of Skyrim would be pretty hype about that. But yeah, I don't pretend to be a marketing expert. It seems to me that once you get to a certain level of fandom, like where you have enough fans that you could get away with releasing games with minimal marketing, or even if you did your marketing after it was already available, that to me seems more sensible too, because we're in an age we're used to anything we want, we just click it and we've got it. Like we want to watch a TV show, it's there. Like what do you need? Why do all these previews when your preview could have a link to buy? Like,
yeah, it seems kind of weird that like Game of Thrones would need to advertise for this final season.
Yeah,
because they're so big, but they, for some reason, they advertised in the Super Bowl. They spent $1 million on that.
Yeah,
I don't know it's hard to like really understand how the casual fan views Elder Scrolls franchise, because we're so into it. Like it's taken up like a majority of our lives.
Right.
It's very important to us. If I mentioned that, like, I mod Skyrim, like to like some of my friends, they'll be like, what's Skyrim?
Right.
It's just,
so I have the same
maybe
problem.
To that person, maybe they do need marketing, but I don't know. Does that person matter, I guess, is the question.
Right. Well, I mean,
because
even
they play games.
I guess my point is, like, even if you're going to have to do that marketing still, wouldn't it make more sense if your marketing is so good that you impress the person, they're like, I want that? Wouldn't it make more sense if it was available right then for them to just click purchase right from the advertisement?
True.
That to me, like, just seems more sensible. Like, I think part of the problem is our corporate structure is designed such that, or maybe not our corporate structure, but our measure of success tends to be like, how many copies did you sell in the first X days, which really shouldn't matter. Really, like from a business standpoint, you would think what would matter would be lifetime. And in that, if you measure from that point of success, then like to me, it would make way more sense if every one of your advertisements, especially online, had a link that could allow you to purchase it.
Right.
But I don't know. I'm no marketing
expert. Like, it would make sense if you saw something that you wanted and then you were able to buy it rather than wait 6 months for it.
Right. Because like otherwise, like, so now instead you build the hype loop, you build all this anticipation, And then if something comes up during that hype loop that turns people off from you, they're not going to purchase it. Whereas if the first time they heard about it, they were able to purchase it, they might have impulse bought it. Like for example, like look at Outer Worlds. It's getting all this flack for going exclusive to the Epic Game Store. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people would have already purchased it by now if it were just available. Like, and then you like say you like then all those people would already have it, and they would give no shits that it was on the Epic Store after that. Like, well, I already own it, so who cares?
Yeah, exactly. The controversy over the Epic Store would probably be less because of the fact that people would be so hyped to be playing it. You know, it's just like they would have something less to complain about. Whereas if you're sitting here now, you're like, I don't want to buy it through Epic. I want to buy it through Steam.
Right.
But it's like if you had the option, you would have just bought it already and just been playing it. So
right.
You wouldn't have time to complain about it.
Yeah,
So.
I don't particularly agree with the going against their decision. Like I think I'm fine with that decision, especially because you can buy it on the Windows Store as well, so it's not actually exclusive. So if you hate Epic, you can buy it on the Windows Store.
All of that.
But
every single publisher should have their own thing, because when you find out how much Steam takes, it's like what? It's like 30%.
Yeah. Well, they
30%.
have. I mean, so I made a comment on one of Juicehead's videos recently defending their decision to go with Epic, and a lot of people pointed out a lot of important points, which is like Steam offers deals where you can get that percentage way down. But I still think the cut they're taking, like the alternative, I think what ends up happening is if you either have competition, like you have something like Epic pop up, and I know Epic, they're accused of a lot of shady practices, so I'm not defending any of those. I'm just talking about this in a vacuum of like without competition of just Steam. The alternative tends to be that you end up with Origin and Battle.net and Bethesda Launcher, where it's like every publisher has their own thing, and I don't want that either. Yeah. That's annoying as hell. So like I would rather see
it is annoying for us to it is annoying for us to install all the programs, but I totally get it, because I mean that's a lot of money.
Right. But it's also like a lot of infrastructure they suddenly have to support. Like Bethesda's having a lot of problems with like mods being undownloadable through their site right now on Xbox, and it's like that's because they're in charge of their own infrastructure. Whereas like something like Steam is very stable. It has a dedicated support staff to making sure it's up all the time, and there's no problem with their download servers. So there's like a lot of advantages to having it more centralized. Is you have It's kind of like my argument against Bethesda sticking with the creation engine is that if you have then your staff and dollars are spread between maintaining and updating a actual engine which integrates with all of the hardware and building the actual gameplay and like making cooler systems. Is like if you can just get all that off of your plate and let a group of experts handle that, then you can focus on what matters. And like the same thing would happen with something like Steam, is rather than you having to worry about distribution and having all these file servers, like you just let experts take care of that. But the problem with only having one like Steam is that then they'd never have to readjust their prices, and eventually they can act. This is something I see for my job, I do a lot of corporate software, especially integration software. So like I'll integrate different platforms together. And one of the problems I see among a lot of my clients is that Amazon is such a behemoth that while they're probably the most pro-consumer company you will ever see, like they'll bend over backwards for you. You can basically return anything without any questions, even to third-party sellers. They are complete dicks to the sellers. Like their rates are outrageous. They have really high demands on the sellers, and like that's the same thing that can happen with Steam. Is like maybe they're super user friendly, but they can be total dicks to the publishers because they have a monopoly on the market, or a pseudo monopoly in the sense that that's what most players are using. So like I am super pro anybody coming in to be a competitor with Steam. Like people have pointed out to me that like Epic have done a lot of shady crap. But anyway, that was my rant against a rant that's pseudo pro Epic, but more like anti-Steam is more what that's about.
Yeah, exactly. Anti-monopoly.
Anti-monopoly, exactly. You got to have some healthy competition in there.
Yeah.
But way off topic anyway from where we started there. But yeah, I wanted to have you on because I especially after I just got done playing through your some of your quests the other day. Your stuff is fantastic. I think everyone should play it if they haven't already, and I hope you. What are you working on now? That's what I should be asking, because like you said yourself, you're addicted to creating for these games. Do you have more stuff in the works? Are you building on your existing mods? Do you have new stuff planned? Like, you tend to have had, like, I remember, I think for Fallout New Vegas, you had a bunch of little mods and then you released them together as a pack. Are you doing anything like that with Fallout 4 or Skyrim?
Not at the moment. I'm kind of just waiting for Starfield, to be honest, or 76. Because we don't know if there's going to be a kit that's coming out for that. So
We just presume there will be.
yeah. If I might just add a radio station to that, I might port Atomic Radio to 76.
Oh, there you go.
I think that's one thing that would be easy to do, is just to port it,
Right.
And then maybe make some new commercials for some of the new products or the new stores that are in that game. That might be something I could do and feel confident in terms of just that the work wouldn't be wasted.
Right.
But yeah, I think I'm just gonna take a break for now, and then yeah, once Starfield comes out, just get back on that.
So has your pattern been the same, like you said, for Fallout 4? You played it for a couple of months and then you got into planning mode. Did that same thing happen with Skyrim? Like when you, or was, oh no, I guess that was the game you learned from. So Fallout 4 was your first opportunity to really get into that pattern. Do you see yourself doing that exact same thing again? You play it until you've got a good feel of it, and then it's like, all right, it's time to start planning.
Yeah, exactly. Because I wasn't entirely sure if like Atomic Radio would translate to Fallout 4, because I wasn't sure if there was a radio station already that did what it did,
right. which
is like have commercials and old world sort of skits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there wasn't. So I was like, oh, okay, then this would work. And you somehow have to like, I mean, you want to do what you want to do. I mean, there's certain things that you want to make, but you also want to make sure that it's integrated well into the game.
Right.
So, like if I have certain ideas for companions, well, I got to make sure that those companions are already redundant or anything. Like if I made a fucking detective, a synth detective or something, and then I see Nick,
right.
It's just like,
so those are probably one you want to hold off till later, of companions. Man, companions are so much work. I can't believe you did so many. Like,
yeah, it's just fun. I mean, the companions are something that I just like doing, I guess. It's just something that it's I don't know. It's just like, it's something cool that I really thought that Skyrim was lacking after playing New Vegas.
Yeah.
That was one of the things there where I just felt like, man, they really dropped the ball. But then I realized that there were different companies. So why would you go back from New Vegas companions to Skyrim companions? But in Fallout 4, they really changed that. They went like the extra mile. That's one of the big things Bethesda did with Fallout 4, is they made companions that were more BioWare-esque.
Yeah. I think they're brilliant, and I think like the tying them into becoming kind of your karma is just brilliant. Like, it's so good. It makes so much more sense. Yeah. Like in reality, you're not your general. You're if you're considered a good person or a bad person is heavily determined by your relationships with people. Yes, like there can be people generally think you're a shitty person if you're Charles Manson, but like for the most part, most of us are good or bad levels measured by the people around us. So like I love that system. I thought it was brilliant, and like the amount of times the NPCs comment on all the different things you're doing really makes the game feel like it's a real place, and like there's really people who care about what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's something that they're going to do going forward. I mean, they're definitely going to fix some things. Like the whole gaming of the like system wasn't really that great. Like you could get Piper to love you just by like picking 100 locks. Right. That is, there are definitely some aspects that needed tweaking, but yeah, they're just going to get better and better, I think, with each game. So
yeah, I can't wait to see. Can't wait to see what they do. So. Awesome, man. Well, this has been fantastic talking with you. I cannot wait to see what you do with whatever next game you get involved in. Do you have anything you want to say to the people before we cut out?
No. I hope this was interesting. We've been talking for like 2.5 hours. It was fun for me, but hopefully people enjoy it as well.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah, I think this is the longest one I've done. I think I had one other person we got close. We got close to this length, but yeah, I like doing it. I like the free form and just see where it goes. I think I could talk to you for several more hours, but I just looked at the clock and I'm like, at some point here, I got to go to sleep or I'm not gonna be a good dad tomorrow.